Hey friends, welcome to the Horror Sleep. Almost 90% of you watching aren't subscribed. If you enjoy these true park ranger horror stories, hit that subscribe button and leave a like. It really helps the channel. Oh, and where are you watching from tonight? Let me know in the comments. The silence in Alaska is no ordinary silence, some folks claim. It is a silence that presses upon you, that is heavy with weight, that forces you to hear the beat of your own heart pounding through your head like a drum. 3 months of total silence at the outpost in Clearwater Valley had taken to make me realize that silence is far more worse than any other sound. Sound, at least, had some meaning that you could comprehend. Silence is waiting. My name is Merritt, and I'm a park ranger for one of the most remote areas of Alaska, so far from Denali that even most people haven't heard of it. No trails for tourists, no gift shops or organized tours either. Thousands of square miles of tundra, ice, and mountains that seem to scrape the belly of the sky. This is the sort of territory where one could go weeks without seeing any other human face. That's exactly what I signed up for. Or at least I thought it was. I'd spent 5 years working the crowded parks down in the lower 48, dealing with entitled tourists, litter, and the endless parade of people who thought nature was some kind of petting zoo. When the position opened up in northern Alaska, I jumped at it. Solitude. Real wilderness. A chance to do actual conservation work without babysitting idiots who wanted selfies with bears. The first month was everything I'd hoped for. The landscape was brutal and beautiful, all harsh angles and endless white. My daily patrols took me across terrain that maybe a dozen people had ever seen. I documented wildlife, checked ice thickness on the lakes, monitored weather patterns. At night, I'd sit in my cabin with a wood fire crackling, reading by lamplight, feeling more at peace than I had in years. Then the strange thing started. It was early January when I first noticed something off. I was doing a routine check of Lake Stillwater, a massive frozen expanse about 8 miles from my station. The ice was solid, at least 3 feet thick in most places, safe enough to walk on, even drive a snowmobile across if needed. I was marking safe routes for the rare research team that might pass through when I saw them. Footprints. Now, footprints in the snow aren't unusual. Animals leave tracks all the time. But these were human prints. Boot prints, to be exact. Deep, deliberate impressions in the snow that covered the lake's frozen surface. I stopped my snowmobile and climbed off, my breath fogging in the -30 air. The prints were fresh, maybe a few hours old at most. They came from the eastern shore, moving in a straight line toward the center of the lake. And then they just stopped. I'm not talking about stopped at the shore or stopped at a snowmobile track. I mean stopped, mid-stride. One print, then another, then another, then nothing. Just smooth, undisturbed snow, stretching out for hundreds of yards in every direction. I stood there for a long moment, my heart starting to hammer in a way that had nothing to do with the cold. I looked up at the sky, half expecting to see a helicopter, thinking maybe someone had been airlifted out. But the sky was empty, just that endless pale gray that passes for daylight in the Arctic winter. I pulled out my radio. "Clearwater Base, this is Merritt. You copy?" Static crackled for a moment before Ronan Hale's voice came through. Ronan was the only other ranger in the sector, stationed about 40 miles south at Cold Creek. We checked in twice daily, mostly to prove we were both still alive. "Copy, Cole. What's your status?" "I'm at Lake Stillwater. Found something weird. Human tracks on the ice, but they just end. No other tracks nearby, no sign of where they went." There was a pause, long enough that I almost called again. "How fresh?" Ronan finally asked. "Few hours, maybe. You know of anyone authorized out here?" "Negative. No research teams scheduled for another month. No hikers crazy enough to be out in this cold. I looked down at the prints again, following their path backward towards the shore. I'm going to track them to origin, see if I can figure out who left them. Be careful, Cole, and keep your radio on. I followed the tracks back across the lake, my boots crunching on the frozen surface. The prints were consistent. Same stride length, same depth, same boot pattern. Whoever made them had walked with purpose, not wandered. When I reached the eastern shore, the tracks continued up a small embankment and into a sparse line of trees. That's where things got stranger. The tracks led to a small clearing, maybe 20 feet across. In the center was a circle of disturbed snow, like someone had sat down or knelt there for a while. But around that circle, the snow was trampled in a weird pattern, not chaotic, but deliberate. Almost like someone had walked in a spiral, around and around, getting tighter with each rotation until they reached the center. And from the center, a single line of tracks led back to the lake, the same tracks I'd followed. I felt cold that had nothing to do with the temperature. Someone had walked here from somewhere else, spiraled into this clearing, sat or knelt in the center, then walked back onto the lake and vanished. I pulled out my camera and documented everything, taking wide shots and close-ups. My hands were shaking slightly, and I told myself it was just the cold. I radioed Ronan again. Found the origin point, weird pattern in the snow. Looks deliberate, but I can't figure out what it means. I'm going to... A sound cut through the air. Distant, muffled, but distinct. A thud, like something heavy striking a surface. I froze, listening. Another thud, then another, rhythmic, coming from the direction of the lake. "Cole, you still there?" Ronan's voice crackled. "Yeah, hold on." I moved back toward the shoreline, straining to hear over the wind. The sound was definitely coming from the lake. I walked out onto the ice, following the sound. Thud, thud, thud. It was getting louder, and it was coming from below, from under the ice. I stopped walking immediately. My training kicked in. Any unusual sounds from ice could mean structural instability, fractures, pressure changes. But this didn't sound like ice settling or cracking. This sounded like something hitting the ice from underneath. Thud, thud, thud. I pulled out my ice probe and drilled down, checking thickness. Solid. 3.5 feet of ice. Nothing could break through that. Nothing. The sound stopped. The silence that followed was absolute. Not even wind. Just my breathing and my heartbeat. Then my radio erupted with static so loud I nearly dropped it. Through the noise, I could barely make out Ronan's voice. "Oh, out." I fumbled with the volume. "Ronan, you're breaking up. Say again." More static. Then clear as day. "Get off the ice." I didn't question it. I turned and ran for the shore, my boots slipping on the frozen surface. Behind me, I heard it. Not a thud this time, but a crack. Long and deep, the sound ice makes when it's about to give way. I didn't look back, I just ran. I reached the shore and scrambled up the embankment, finally turning to look at the lake. The ice was intact. No cracks, no holes, no sign of instability. It sat there, smooth and frozen and utterly still. My radio crackled. "Cole, you copy?" "Yeah," I gasped, trying to catch my breath. "Yeah, I'm off the ice. What the hell was that?" "What was what?" "The cracking. You told me to get off the ice right before it started cracking." Silence. "Ronan?" "Cole, I didn't tell you to get off the ice." My last transmission was asking about the track pattern. You went silent for about 10 minutes. I was about to call for a welfare check. I looked at my watch. He was right. Somehow, I'd lost 10 minutes. The last thing I remembered clearly was hearing the thuds from under the ice, then the static on the radio, then running. But according to my watch and Ronan, I'd been standing out there in silence for 10 minutes before I ran. "I'm heading back to base," I said quietly. "Copy that. We need to talk when you get there." The ride back to my cabin was the longest 8 miles of my life. I kept checking over my shoulder, expecting to see what? I didn't know. The landscape looked the same as always. Endless, white, gray sky, the distant mountains like teeth on the horizon. But something felt different. Wrong. I made it back as the brief daylight started fading. In Alaska in January, you get maybe 4 hours of twilight that passes for day. The rest is darkness. I secured my snowmobile and practically ran inside, slamming the door and throwing the bolt. My cabin was small, but well insulated. One main room with a kitchenette, a wood stove, a cot, and a desk covered in maps and reports. A small bathroom in the back, windows on 3 sides. I'd always liked the windows. They made the place feel less claustrophobic. Now I wished I had fewer of them. I started a fire in the stove and made coffee, my hands still shaking. Not from cold, from something else. I kept replaying the sequence in my mind. The tracks, the spiral, the thuds from under the ice, the lost time. My radio crackled. "Cole, you there?" "Yeah, Ronan." "Okay, I need you to tell me exactly what happened, everything." I did. When I finished, there was a long silence. "Cole, I'm going to tell you something, but you have to promise not to freak out." That's never how you want a conversation to start. "What?" "This isn't the first time." My stomach dropped. "What do you mean?" 3 years ago, before you got here, there was another ranger in your sector. Guy named David Pritchard. Good ranger, experienced, been in Alaska for over a decade. He reported similar things. Tracks that ended in the middle of nowhere. Sounds under the ice. Lost time. What happened to him? Another pause. He walked out onto Lake Stillwater one morning. Radioed me. Said he was doing a routine check. Never came back. We found his snowmobile on the shore, tracks leading onto the ice. His footprints went about 200 yards, then stopped, just like the ones you found today. The coffee cup felt heavy in my hands. They searched for a week, Ronan continued. Brought in dogs, helicopters, dive teams when the ice melted in spring. Never found a trace. The official report said he fell through the ice, but what? The ice never broke, Cole. We checked it a dozen times. It was solid. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the darkness. Somewhere out there, Lake Stillwater sat, frozen and waiting. Why didn't anyone tell me this before I took the position? Would you have taken it if they had? Fair point. Listen, Ronan said, his voice softer now. I've been out here 6 years. I've seen a lot of weird things. This place, it does something to you. The isolation, the darkness, the cold. Your mind starts playing tricks. You start seeing patterns where there aren't any. Hearing things in the silence, it's normal. Those tracks were real, Ronan. I have photos. I'm not saying they weren't real. I'm saying there's probably a logical explanation. Maybe someone from a hunting party, or a researcher who didn't file proper permits. Maybe they had a vehicle pickup you didn't see. The lost time could be mild hypothermia. It messes with your perception. The sounds under the ice could be normal settling. He was giving me every rational explanation. They all sounded hollow. Get some rest, Ronan said. We'll talk in the morning. And Cole, stay inside tonight. Don't go out for any reason. Wasn't planning on it. The radio went dead. I made dinner, though I barely tasted it. As night fell completely, the darkness outside the windows became absolute. Not like darkness in the city, where there's always some light pollution. This was primordial darkness, the kind humans spent millions of years fearing. I sat by the fire, trying to read, but I couldn't focus. Every creak of the cabin settling, every whisper of wind made me jump. I kept looking at the windows, seeing my own reflection staring back at me. Around midnight, I finally forced myself to lie down. Sleep seemed impossible, but exhaustion won. I drifted off with the fire crackling and my clothes still on. I don't know what time it was when I woke up. The fire had burned down to embers, casting barely any light. The cabin was cold, and someone was knocking on my door. Not pounding, not banging, just 3 steady knocks. Thud, thud, thud. The same rhythm I'd heard under the ice. I sat up slowly, my heart hammering. I didn't move toward the door, I didn't call out, I just listened. Thud, thud, thud. 3 more knocks, patient, steady. I looked at the window near the door, trying to see outside, but the darkness was complete. Then I noticed something that made my blood turn to ice. In the thin frost that had formed on the inside of the window, someone had drawn something. A spiral, starting at the edge and curling inward, getting tighter and tighter until it reached the center, just like the pattern in the snow at the clearing. The knocking stopped. I sat there in the darkness, not moving, barely breathing. Minutes passed, or maybe hours. Time felt strange, elastic. Finally, as the first hint of gray dawn started to show at the windows, I got up. My muscles were stiff from sitting motionless for so long. I approached the door slowly, quietly, and looked through the peephole. Nothing. Just snow and darkness fading to gray. I opened the door a crack, cold air rushing in. No one there. I stepped outside, looking around. Fresh snow had fallen during the night, covering everything in a pristine layer of white. No footprints, no tracks, no sign anyone had been here. But on my door, scratched into the wood where I couldn't have seen it from inside, was the spiral again, carved deep into the grain. I radioed Ronan as soon as I was back inside. Someone was here last night. What? Are you okay? I told him everything, the knocking, the spiral on the window, the carving on the door. I'm coming up there, he said immediately. Should take me about 6 hours with the snowmobile. Stay inside, keep your radio on, and for God's sake, don't go near that lake. I'm not going anywhere. But as I said it, I found myself looking at my maps, at the mark I'd made for Lake Stillwater, at all the terrain between here and there, and I realized with growing horror that I wanted to go back, not because I needed to, not for any logical reason, but because something in my mind was pulling me toward that frozen expanse like a fish on a line. I spent the next 6 hours fighting that pull. I organized my supplies, I checked my equipment, I wrote up reports, anything to keep my mind occupied. But through it all, I could feel it. That insistent tug toward the lake. When Ronan finally arrived, the relief I felt was overwhelming. He came in stamping snow off his boots, his face red from the cold. He was a big guy, mid-40s, with a beard that was more ice than hair at the moment. "Show me," he said. I showed him the spiral carved into the door. He ran his fingers over it, frowning. "This is fresh, cut within the last day. I know. But you didn't hear any carving sounds? Just knocking?" "Just knocking." He looked at me with an expression I couldn't read. Not quite skepticism, but not belief either. Something in between. "Cole, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest. Have you been taking your medication?" I blinked. "What medication?" "Your file said you take something for anxiety, prescribed after incident at your last posting." My jaw tightened. That was years ago, and I stopped taking that medication 2 years back with my doctor's approval. I'm fine. Are you? Because this is a lot of stress being out here alone. It's not weakness to... I'm not having a breakdown, Ronan. Someone or something was here last night. He held up his hands. Okay, I'm just trying to cover all bases. He looked at the door again. Could be a person. Someone who shouldn't be out here. Maybe trying to scare you or rob the place. We should report it. To who? We're the law enforcement out here. To Regional Command. Get someone up here to investigate properly. That'll take weeks. And in the meantime, I stay here with you. 2 sets of eyes. 2 people to verify things. Makes it harder for your mind to play tricks and harder for anyone else to mess with you. I wanted to argue, to insist I was fine alone. But the truth was, I wasn't fine. The thought of Ronan leaving, of being alone again, filled me with a dread I couldn't quite name. Okay, I agreed. We spent the rest of that day securing the cabin. Ronan checked all the windows and doors, looking for signs of tampering. We set up a basic perimeter using fishing line and bells, primitive but effective for detecting movement. As we worked, I kept looking toward the direction of Lake Stillwater, even though I couldn't see it from here. Tell me about Pritchard, I said as we were finishing up. You said he reported similar things. What exactly? Ronan was quiet for a moment, staring out the window. First couple months, nothing unusual. Then he started reporting tracks that didn't make sense. Animals that should have been hibernating. Prints that ended abruptly. Then the sounds started. He'd hear things under the ice, in the distance. Always rhythmic, always 3 beats. Thud, thud, thud. Like knocking, Ronan confirmed. He got obsessed with it. Started mapping where he heard the sounds, looking for patterns. He'd spend hours out on the ice, drilling, listening. We'd have our check-ins and all he'd want to talk about was the sounds and the tracks. Did he ever find an explanation? He thought he did. Started talking about ice caves under the lakes, about how sound could travel and echo in weird ways. He convinced himself there was a whole network of caverns under the permafrost, and that movement in them was causing the sounds and somehow affecting the surface. Is that possible? Ronan shrugged. Geologically, maybe, but the state surveyed this whole area before designating it. No significant cave systems. The ground's too stable. So, what did he think he was hearing? Toward the end, he stopped thinking it was geological. He started talking about it differently. Said the ice was calling to him, that it wanted to show him something. The temperature in the cabin felt like it dropped 10 degrees. And then he walked out onto the lake and disappeared. Yeah. We were quiet for a while. Outside, the brief twilight was fading into night again. I lit the lamps and got the fire going strong. I want to see his reports, I said. Everything he documented. Cole, I need to know, Ronan. If this is happening again, I need to understand what I'm dealing with. He looked at me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. I'll get them from Cold Creek, but not tonight. Tonight we stay here, stay warm, and stay alert. We took turns sleeping that night. 3-hour shifts, one of us always awake and watching. During my watch from midnight to 3 a.m., nothing happened. The cabin was quiet except for Ronan's snoring and the occasional pop from the fire. The perimeter bells didn't ring. No knocking on the door. But around 2 a.m., I noticed something that made my skin crawl. The frost on the windows was forming patterns. Not the random crystalline structures you normally see, but organized spirals. Starting at the edges of each window and curling inward toward the center. All of them. Every window in the cabin. I woke Ronan. He looked at the windows, his face pale in the lamplight. That's not normal. No shit. We watched as the patterns grew more defined, more deliberate. The spirals tightened, curled, reached toward their centers with mathematical precision. "We need to leave," Ronan said. "Now. We'll go to Cold Creek, get help, come back with equipment and more people." "What equipment? What are we even dealing with here?" "I don't know. But staying here isn't safe." He was right. I knew he was right. But that pull toward the lake was stronger now, almost overwhelming. I found myself stepping toward the door without consciously deciding to. "Cole, what are you doing?" I stopped, my hand on the doorknob. "I don't know. Step away from the door." I tried, I really did, but my hand was already turning the knob, already pulling it open. Cold air rushed in, and with it, that sound. Thud, thud, thud. Not from outside, from everywhere. From the ground beneath us, from the air around us, from inside my own chest. My heartbeat syncing with the rhythm. Ronan grabbed my arm, yanking me back. The door slammed shut, and the sound stopped. We stood there panting, staring at each other. "Pack," Ronan said. "Right now. We're leaving." But when he tried the door, it wouldn't open. The bolt slid back fine, the knob turned, but the door itself was stuck fast, like it was frozen shut even though the hinges were inside. He tried a window, same thing, wouldn't budge. "What the hell?" He pulled out his radio. "Cold Creek Base, this is Hale. Emergency situation. Request immediate assistance at Clearwater Valley Cabin. Over." Static. He tried again. Same result. No response. Just white noise. We were trapped. For the rest of that night, we sat back to back in the center of the cabin, both of us armed with the emergency flare guns from the supply closet. Not that we knew what we'd shoot at. The spirals on the windows continued to grow, to tighten. And underneath everything, barely audible but constant, was that three-beat rhythm. Thud, thud, thud. When dawn finally came, that pale, weak dawn that passes for daylight, the sounds stopped. The spirals remained on the windows, but they stopped growing. And when Ronan tried the door again, it opened easily. We stood in the doorway looking out at fresh snow that showed no tracks, no disturbances. Like the whole night had been a nightmare we'd shared, except the spirals were still on the windows, still carved in the frost. "We need answers," I said. "We need to leave," Ronan countered. "No, not yet." I looked toward where Lake Stillwater lay, hidden beyond the hills and trees. Pritchard figured something out, something that made him walk out on that ice. I need to know what it was. It got him killed, Cole. Maybe. Or maybe he's still out there, under the ice. Ronan looked at me like I was crazy. Maybe I was. But I could feel it now, stronger than ever. The pull. The need to go to that lake and find out what was waiting there. "I'm going to Cold Creek," Ronan said. "Getting help. You're coming with me even if I have to tie you to the back of my snowmobile. You can try." We stared at each other. Finally, Ronan sighed. "One day," he said. "We look at Pritchard's files, we document everything, and then we leave. Both of us. Agreed?" I nodded, even though I wasn't sure I was telling the truth, because deep down I knew I wasn't leaving, not until I stood on that frozen lake and understood what was calling to me from beneath the ice, even if it cost me everything. The ride to Cold Creek took 4 hours through terrain that would have been beautiful under different circumstances. Rolling tundra, stands of skeletal trees, mountains that looked like broken teeth against the gray sky. But I barely noticed. My mind was caught in a loop, replaying the night before. The knocking, the spirals, the feeling of my hand on that doorknob, acting without my permission. Ronan led on his snowmobile, and I followed. We didn't talk over the radio except for the occasional navigation check. What was there to say? Cold Creek Station was larger than my cabin, a proper ranger outpost with multiple buildings, a generator, even a satellite dish for limited internet access. It felt almost civilized after the isolation of Clearwater Valley. Inside, Ronan went straight to a filing cabinet in the corner of the main office. He pulled out a thick folder, hesitated for a moment, then handed it to me. Pritchard's reports, everything from his first day to his last transmission. I took the folder to a desk and started reading. The first few months were routine. Wildlife observations, weather data, maintenance logs, nothing unusual. Pritchard's handwriting was neat, his reports thorough and professional. Then, around the 4-month mark, the tone started to change. January 15th, unusual track patterns observed on Lake Stillwater. Single set of boot prints, adult male size, extending approximately 300 yards onto the ice before terminating. No explanation for cessation of prints. Ice solid, no evidence of breakthrough. Will continue to monitor. January 18th, acoustic anomaly reported. Low-frequency rhythmic sound emanating from beneath lake ice. 3-beat pattern, consistent interval. Duration, approximately 20 minutes. Recorded on portable device. Will analyze. January 22nd. Track patterns observed again. Different location, same phenomenon. Prints appear, continue for distance, then stop. Spiraling pattern found in snow near origin point. Geometric precision suggests deliberate creation. I flipped to the recordings he mentioned. Ronan had digital files on his computer. I put on headphones and listened. The sound quality was poor, lots of wind noise and static. But underneath it, I could hear it. Thud, thud, thud. The same rhythm I'd heard. The same rhythm that had synced with my heartbeat. There's more, Ronan said quietly, looking over my shoulder. Keep reading. The entries grew more frequent, more obsessive. Pritchard had started going to the lake every day, sometimes multiple times. He'd mapped the locations of the mysterious tracks, creating an elaborate chart. When I looked at it, my stomach turned. The locations formed a spiral, starting at the edges of the lake and curling inward, tightening with each occurrence, all leading toward the center of the frozen expanse. February 3rd. Pattern analysis complete. Track occurrences follow logarithmic spiral formation, consistent with natural phenomena, nautilus shells, galaxy arms, etc. Center point calculated to be approximately 600 yards from eastern shore. Significance unknown. Will investigate. February 5th. Spent 6 hours at calculated center point. Ice thickness measured at 4.2 feet. Acoustically active. Sound pattern more pronounced at this location. Almost like communication. Am I losing my mind? February 8th. Can't sleep. The sounds follow me back to the cabin. Not physically, in my head. I hear them when it's quiet. 3 beats, like a heartbeat, like it's calling. Is this what isolation does? Am I experiencing psychological breakdown? February 10th. Spoke with Hale. He thinks I need to leave, take a break, maybe he's right, but I'm so close to understanding. The spiral means something. The center point means something. If I leave now, I'll never know. The entries stopped after that. The last page in the file was a transcript of his final radio transmission. February 12th, 0800 hours. Pritchard to Cold Creek. I'm heading to Lake Stillwater, going to the center point one more time. There's something there. I know there is if I don't come back. Tell them I went voluntarily. This wasn't the ice. This wasn't an accident. I need to know. Out. I closed the folder and sat back, my hands shaking. He knew, I said. He knew something was going to happen. He was having a breakdown, Ronan replied. The isolation, the darkness, the obsession, it broke him. That's what this place does, Cole. It gets inside your head and it breaks you down until you can't tell what's real anymore. Then why am I experiencing the same things, the same tracks, the same sounds, the same spirals? Because you read about them. Your mind is filling in the pattern. It's called suggestion, and it's powerful. What about you? You heard the sounds last night. You saw the spirals on the windows. Ronan was quiet for a moment. I saw frost patterns. Could have been wind currents, temperature differentials. And the sounds could have been the cabin settling, or my own imagination fed by your fear. You don't believe that? I'm trying to. I stood up and walked to the window. Outside, the brief daylight was already fading. Soon it would be dark again, and the thought of another night in that cabin filled me with dread. But the thought of leaving, of never knowing what was out there on that frozen lake, was worse. I need to go to the center point, I said. Absolutely not. Ronan, listen to me. Either something real is happening out there, or I'm having the same breakdown Pritchard had. Either way, I need to know. If I don't face this, it's going to follow me wherever I go. And if facing it means you disappear like Pritchard did, then at least you'll know what happened. You can warn whoever comes after me. He grabbed my arm, spun me around to face him. This isn't a joke, Cole. People have died out here, good rangers, experienced people. You can't just, I'm going, I said firmly. With or without you. But I'd rather not go alone. We stared at each other for a long moment. I could see the conflict in his eyes, the part of him that wanted to drag me back to civilization versus the part that understood the need to know, to solve the mystery. Finally, he sighed. If we do this, we do it smart. We go during daylight, we stay in radio contact with base, we bring emergency equipment, and the second anything feels wrong, we leave. Agreed? Agreed. We spent the rest of the evening preparing. Ronan contacted Regional Command, told them we were investigating unusual ice formations and might be out of radio contact for a few hours. He didn't mention Pritchard, or the spirals, or any of the things that would make them think we were losing our minds. We packed survival gear, ice picks, rope, thermal blankets, flares, emergency beacon. Ronan brought his dive knife, and I had my utility knife. Not that we knew what we might need them for. That night, I barely slept. I lay in the spare room at Cold Creek, listening to the wind howl outside, and wondered what we'd find at the center of Lake Stillwater. Part of me hoped we'd find nothing, just ice and snow, and a rational explanation for everything. But a deeper part, a part I didn't want to acknowledge, hoped we'd find something else. Something that would make sense of the pull I felt, the compulsion that had taken root in my mind like a parasite. We left at first light, which meant around 10 a.m. The sky was the color of old bruises, and a light snow was falling. Not enough to be dangerous, but enough to make visibility tricky. The ride to Lake Stillwater took an hour. As we approached, I felt it again, that magnetic pull, stronger than ever. My hands gripped the snowmobile handlebars so tight my fingers went numb. We parked on the eastern shore, the same place I'd found the tracks days before. The spiral pattern in the clearing was still there, partially filled with fresh snow, but still visible. Ronan pulled out his GPS unit. According to Pritchard's calculations, the center point is about 600 yards that direction. He pointed toward the middle of the lake. The ice stretched out before us, vast and white and utterly still. No wind now. The snow had stopped. The silence was complete. We stepped onto the ice, Each footstep echoed in the stillness. I could hear my own breathing, my heartbeat, thud, thud, thud. No, that wasn't my heartbeat. That was... "Do you hear that?" I whispered. Ronan nodded. His face was pale. The sound was coming from beneath us. Faint, but there. 3 beats, pause, 3 beats, pause, like before. But this time it wasn't random or distant. It was directly below our feet. We kept walking. 200 yards. 400 yards. The sound grew louder. My GPS showed we were approaching the coordinates Pritchard had calculated. At 550 yards, Ronan stopped. He was staring down at the ice. "Cole, look." The ice beneath us wasn't smooth. There were marks in it. Scratches, maybe, or carvings. Hard to see at first, but once I noticed them, they were everywhere. And they formed a pattern, a spiral, carved into the ice itself, visible through the thin layer of snow, starting at the edge of my vision and curling inward, tightening, leading toward a point about 50 yards ahead. "We should turn back," Ronan said, but he didn't move. Neither did I. We stood there, paralyzed by indecision and fear and that terrible, irresistible pull. Then the ice beneath us shifted, not cracking, not breaking, just shifting, like something underneath had moved. The sound changed, no longer just 3 beats, but something else. Something that sounded almost like breathing. "Off the ice," Ronan said. "Now." We turned to run. But the ice had other ideas. The surface beneath our feet became suddenly, impossibly slick, like someone had poured oil on it. My boots lost traction and I went down hard, sliding several feet before I could stop myself. Ronan fared no better, crashing to his hands and knees, and we were sliding toward the center of the spiral, not fast, but steady, inexorable, like the ice was tilted, though my eyes said it was level. Physics said this was impossible, but we were sliding anyway, drawn toward that center point like water down a drain. I clawed at the ice with my picks. They skittered off the surface, unable to find purchase. Ronan was doing the same, with the same lack of success. The sound was louder now. Not breathing. That had been my imagination. It was words. Whispered words in a language I didn't recognize, bubbling up from beneath the ice like water from a spring. We slid past the 600-yard mark. The center of the spiral was directly ahead now, maybe 20 feet away. And I could see that it wasn't just markings on the ice. It was a hole, not a natural hole, not a crack or a break. A perfect circle, about 3 feet across, cut through 4 feet of solid ice. The edges were smooth, almost polished. And from it came the whispers and that sound. Thud, thud, thud. And something else. Light. Pale blue light, emanating from the water below the ice, pulsing with that same 3-beat rhythm. We reached the edge of the hole and stopped. Not because we'd managed to grab hold of something, but because the ice stopped pulling us. We lay there, panting, staring down into the impossible opening. The light was brighter up close. It illuminated the water beneath the ice. Water that should have been frozen but wasn't. And in that water I saw shapes, geometric patterns, spirals within spirals descending into the depths. "What is this?" I whispered. The whispers from below grew louder in response, still in that unknown language, but the tone was clear. Invitation. Welcome. Come see. Ronan grabbed my arm. "Don't look at it. Don't listen. We need to..." The ice gave way beneath us. Not breaking. Opening like a door swinging wide. 1 second we were lying on solid ice. The next we were falling into water so cold it felt like fire. I went under, the shock driving the air from my lungs. But the water was strange. Thick. almost viscous, and full of that blue light. I could see Ronan next to me, his eyes wide with terror, both of us sinking deeper even as we tried to swim. The spirals were all around us now, not just patterns in the ice, but structures. Ice formations that curved and twisted in ways that hurt to look at. Following them with my eyes made me dizzy, disoriented. Up became down. Left became right. And at the bottom of it all, far below, something was waiting. Not a thing I could describe. Not a creature or an object. Just a presence. A vast, cold intelligence that had been here long before humans set foot in Alaska, that would be here long after we were gone. It was watching us, studying us, curious. The whispers resolved into something I could almost understand. Not words in any human language, but meaning translated directly into thought. Come closer. See what we show you. Understand. My lungs were burning. I needed air. But I also needed to see, to understand, to know what this was. The pull was overwhelming now, not external but internal. My own desperate curiosity, magnified 100-fold. Then Ronan grabbed me. He'd somehow gotten his knife out and was cutting. Not at the ice, but at the water itself. His blade glowed red-hot in his hand, and where it touched, the water recoiled. The spirals broke apart. The light dimmed. He pulled me upward, toward a surface that my oxygen-starved brain could barely process. We broke through, not into air, but onto solid ice. We were back on the surface, the hole gone, nothing but smooth frozen expanse in every direction. We lay there gasping, coughing up water that tasted like metal in time. My whole body was shaking, and not from cold. "How did you—" I managed. Ronan was staring at his knife. The blade was normal now. No glow, no heat. "I don't know. I thought about fire, about heat, about breaking free, and the knife just responded." We helped each other to our feet. My GPS was dead, water damaged despite its waterproof casing. Ronan's was the same. We had no idea which direction was shore, but we could still see our snowmobile tracks in the snow leading back the way we came. We followed them, moving as fast as we dared, not speaking, not looking back. It took forever to reach the shore. Or maybe it took minutes. Time felt wrong, elastic. But eventually, we stumbled off the ice and onto solid ground. Our snowmobiles were there, waiting, untouched. We rode back to Cold Creek in silence. The whole way I kept checking over my shoulder, expecting to see something following. But there was only the empty landscape and the falling snow. Back at the station, we stripped off our wet clothes and sat by the heater, drinking coffee spiked with whiskey and trying to process what had happened. "It's not natural," Ronan finally said. "Whatever that is, it's not geological, not some weird ice formation or acoustic phenomenon. No shit. So, what is it?" I thought about the presence I'd felt beneath the ice, the vast, cold intelligence, the spirals that seemed to exist in more dimensions than 3. I think it's old, older than we can comprehend. And I think it's been here forever, sleeping under the ice. And sometimes it wakes up, reaches out, calls to people. Why? Maybe it's lonely, maybe it's curious, maybe it's hungry. I shuddered. Pritchard came to the center point. He felt the same pull we did. But he came alone, and he went in, and he never came back out. You think he's still down there? I think he's part of it now, part of the pattern, another spiral in the infinite regression. We sat in silence for a long time. Outside, night was falling again. 4 hours of gray daylight, then back to darkness. The cycle of winter in Alaska. "We can't tell anyone about this," Ronan said. "They'll think we're insane. We probably are insane. Maybe, but we're alive. That's more than Pritchard can say." He looked at me seriously. "You need to leave, Cole. Put in for a transfer. Get out of this sector before that thing under the ice calls to you again." "What about you?" "Someone needs to stay. Someone needs to make sure people don't go wandering onto that lake. I've been here 6 years. I know how to resist it now. Do you? Or are you just better at pretending?" He didn't answer. That night, I packed my things. In the morning, I'd ride to the nearest communication point and call in my transfer request. Mental health break, stress leave, whatever excuse they'd accept. But as I lay in bed, trying to sleep, I could feel it. That pull, weaker here than at Clearwater Valley, but still there. A hook in my mind, a tether running back to that frozen lake and the presence beneath it. And I knew, with a certainty that terrified me, that I'd never truly be free of it. Because once the ice calls to you, it never really lets go. It just waits. I didn't leave. I told myself I would. I called Regional Command. I started the transfer paperwork. I even packed my personal belongings into boxes. But when the helicopter was scheduled to arrive, 3 weeks after our experience at the lake, I sent it away. I told them I'd changed my mind. That I wanted to finish out the winter season, that I was fine. All lies. The truth was that I couldn't leave. Every time I thought about boarding that helicopter, about putting distance between myself and Lake Stillwater, I felt physically ill. Like my body was rejecting the very idea of separation. Ronan understood. He didn't approve, but he understood. "It's got its hooks in you," he said when I told him I was staying. "Same as it did with Pritchard. I'm not going to end up like Pritchard. How do you know?" I didn't, but I knew I couldn't run from it either. Whatever that presence was beneath the ice, it had marked me. Running would just mean dying somewhere else, still tethered, still caught in its gravitational pull. Better to stay, to watch, to try to understand. The weeks that followed were a study in controlled paranoia. I stayed at Cold Creek instead of returning to my cabin at Clearwater Valley. Ronan and I developed a system. Never alone. Never more than shouting distance from each other. Regular check-ins every hour, even when we were in the same building. We researched everything we could find about the area's history, geological surveys, indigenous legends. The native Dena'ina people had stories about the lakes in this region. Most were about respect, about not taking more than you needed, about honoring the spirits of the land. But there was one story that caught my attention. An elder had recorded it in the 1970s, before he died. It talked about the ice that dreams, about frozen lakes that were doorways to another place. A cold place. A place where geometry worked differently and time moved in spirals instead of lines. The story said that sometimes the ice would call to people, show them wonders, offer them knowledge. But those who accepted the ice's invitation never came back. Or if they did, they were changed, hollow, like something essential had been removed and replaced with cold blue light. They knew, I said to Ronan, showing him the transcription. The people who lived here for thousands of years, they knew about it. Knowing about something and understanding it are different things, Ronan replied. They knew enough to stay away from it. But we can't stay away, can we? Not completely. We're rangers. Our job is to patrol this area, to keep it safe. Maybe that's the problem. Maybe this isn't a place humans are supposed to keep safe. Maybe we're the ones who need protection from it. He had a point. But the Park Service wasn't going to close down thousands of square miles of wilderness because of strange ice formations and indigenous legends. And even if they did, the ice would still be there. Still calling, still waiting. Around mid-February, strange things started happening at Cold Creek. Nothing dramatic at first. Small things. Equipment that was put away in one place would appear in another. Food supplies would rearrange themselves in the pantry. The clocks would lose time, never a lot, just a few minutes here and there. Easy to dismiss as forgetfulness or mechanical error. Then the scratching started. It would begin around midnight. Soft, persistent scratching sounds in the walls. We'd check for animals, mice, voles, anything that might have gotten into the structure. But we never found anything. The scratching would move from wall to wall, room to room, always just out of sight. And on the windows, frost would form in patterns. Always the same pattern. Spirals. "It's closer," Ronan said one night, staring at the spirals on the kitchen window. "The center of Lake Stillwater is 40 miles from here. It shouldn't be able to reach this far." Maybe it's not reaching. Maybe it's growing. That thought kept us both awake. We started monitoring the lake remotely. Ronan had a trail camera with a long-range wireless transmitter, usually used for watching wildlife. We set it up on the eastern shore, pointed at the ice, and checked the feed every day. For 2 weeks, nothing. Just static images of frozen wasteland. Then, on February 28th, the camera caught something. A figure. Human-shaped, walking onto the ice. The timestamp said 3:47 a.m. The figure moved steadily toward the center of the lake, its gait oddly mechanical. When it reached approximately the center point, where we'd fallen through, where Pritchard had disappeared, it stopped, and it stood there. For 6 hours, not moving, not doing anything, just standing. When daylight came, the figure was gone. The ice was empty again. "Could be a hiker," Ronan suggested, but his voice lacked conviction. At 3 a.m. in the middle of winter, walking onto a frozen lake and standing in one spot for 6 hours. Then what is it? I enhanced the image as much as our equipment would allow. The figure was wearing what looked like ranger gear. Standard issue jacket, boots, the kind of clothing either Ronan or I might wear. "It's showing us," I said quietly. "Showing us what happens to people it takes. They become echoes, repetitions of the pattern. That's not possible. We fell through solid ice into water that wasn't frozen. We saw spirals that existed in impossible dimensions. We felt a presence that's older than human civilization. At what point do we stop saying not possible?" The figure appeared again the next night. Same time, same path, same 6-hour vigil in the center of the ice. And the night after that, and the night after that. A pattern, a spiral in time instead of space. On the 5th night, I made a decision. "I'm going out there," I told Ronan. "No. I need to see it, face to face, understand what it is. You understand plenty. You understand it's dangerous, that it takes people, that it'll take you too if you let it. What if the figure is Pritchard? What if some part of him is still out there, still trying to complete the pattern? Maybe I can help him, break the cycle." Ronan grabbed my shoulders, forced me to look at him. "Listen to yourself, Cole. That's not rational thinking. That's the ice talking, using your empathy against you, making you want to go to it." He was right. I knew he was right. But the pull was so strong now, a physical ache in my chest. I could feel the presence beneath the ice even from 40 miles away, feel it thinking about me, curious about my resistance. "I have to try," I whispered. "Then I'm coming with you. No, if this goes wrong, someone needs to report it. Someone needs to warn whoever comes after us." We argued for hours, but I was determined, and eventually Ronan realized he couldn't stop me. The best he could do was prepare me. We gathered equipment, rope, lots of rope, flares, Emergency beacon. He gave me his knife, the one that had glowed red and cut through the impossible water. I don't know why it worked, he said, but maybe it'll work again. Maybe the intention behind it is what matters, the will to escape, to survive. I took the knife. It felt heavier than it should, like it was weighted with responsibility. If I'm not back by dawn, I said, don't come after me. Contact Regional Command. Tell them everything. The ice, the spirals, all of it. Let them think we're crazy. At least there'll be a record. Cole, promise me. He promised. I left at midnight. The ride to Lake Stillwater was the longest 40 miles of my life. Every instinct screamed at me to turn back, that I was driving toward my own death. But the pull was stronger. The need to know, to understand, to finally confront what had been haunting me for months. The lake was waiting, silent under a starless sky. The aurora borealis played overhead, green and purple curtains of light that made the ice glow. I parked the snowmobile and checked my watch. 3:40 a.m. 7 minutes until the figure usually appeared. I waited. At exactly 3:47, I felt the change in the air. A drop in temperature beyond what was natural. And from the darkness of the far shore, a shape emerged. The figure, walking onto the ice with that same mechanical gait. I raised my flashlight. The beam caught it, and I got my first clear look. It was wearing ranger gear, but the face, there was no face. Just smooth ice, perfectly transparent, showing nothing inside. The body moved like it had joints, but when the light hit it at the right angle, I could see it was solid. One piece, a sculpture, an effigy, a hollow mannequin made of living ice. It walked past me, not 20 feet away. Didn't acknowledge my presence, didn't deviate from its path, just walked toward the center of the lake. And I followed, I don't know why. Maybe the pull. Maybe curiosity. Maybe because some part of me recognized the futility of resistance. We walked together, the ice figure and I, toward the heart of the spiral. My footprints in the snow were dark and chaotic. Its feet left no marks at all. When we reached the center point, it stopped. I stopped beside it. For a moment, nothing happened. We stood there in the silence, two figures on a frozen wasteland under dancing lights. Then the ice opened beneath us. Not breaking, not cracking, just opening, like a door, like a mouth, like a portal to somewhere else. We fell, but this time I was ready. As we dropped into that thick, viscous water full of blue light and impossible geometry, I pulled out Ronan's knife. I thought about fire, about heat, about the sun on my face in summer, about warmth and light and things that lived instead of just existing. The knife glowed red in my hand. The water recoiled from it, creating a bubble of air around me. I could breathe. I could see. The ice figure was sinking beside me, pulled down by the spirals, dissolving back into the pattern that created it. It didn't struggle. It wasn't afraid. It was just returning to where it came from. I looked down. The presence was there. I could see it now, really see it for the first time. Not a creature, not an entity with form or face, just structure, mathematics made manifest. Infinite, recursive patterns that existed in more dimensions than my mind could process. It was beautiful, terrible, ancient beyond measure. And it was lonely. I understood then, not through words or thoughts, but through some deeper comprehension that bypassed language entirely. This thing beneath the ice had been here for eons. Long before humans, before mammals, maybe before life itself crawled out of the oceans. It was a remnant of something older, something from when the universe was younger and the laws of physics were more flexible. It wasn't evil. It wasn't malicious. It was just alien. So completely other that interaction with it was like trying to speak with the concept of mathematics itself. It called to people because it was curious, because in all its infinite existence, it had never encountered minds like ours, chaotic, emotional, irrational. We were fascinating to it, puzzles to solve, patterns to incorporate into its endless spiral. Those who came willingly, like Pritchard, were taken apart gently, studied, their patterns extracted and replicated in ice. The figures that walked the lake were echoes, recordings, the presence's attempt to understand what it meant to be human by copying our forms and behaviors. Those who resisted, like me, were a different kind of puzzle. More interesting. The presence wanted to know why we fought, what drove our survival instinct, why we clung to our chaotic existence when the piece of pattern was so much simpler. I felt it reaching toward me, not physically, but conceptually, trying to understand the heat I carried, the fire in Ronan's knife that could push back against cold and order and infinite regression. And I realized that the knife wasn't magical. It wasn't special. Ronan hadn't done anything supernatural. He just wanted, desperately, fiercely, to survive, to save me, to resist. And that want, that fierce, human, stubborn refusal to accept the inevitable, had been enough to make even impossible water step back. The presence couldn't understand that. Want was foreign to it. Desire, hope, fear, love. All the messy emotional drives that made humans human were incomprehensible to something that existed as pure pattern. I started to swim upward, the knife blazing in my hand, and the presence let me go. Not because I'd beaten it, not because I'd solved some puzzle or broken some curse, but because it had learned what it wanted to learn. I was a more interesting study if I survived, if I went back to the world and lived with the memory of what I'd seen, if I carried the pattern in my mind, spreading it through stories and reports and nightmares. The presence didn't need to physically capture people anymore. We would carry pieces of it with us, voluntary hosts to an idea that would spiral through human consciousness like a fractal virus. I broke through the ice and into air, not at the center of the lake, on the shore, right next to my snowmobile. The lake was smooth and frozen and showed no sign of disturbance. I lay on the snow, gasping, the knife still hot in my hand. When I finally had the strength to check my watch, it was 3:54 a.m. 7 minutes had passed. I rode back to Cold Creek as dawn broke. The sky was the color of bruises, purple and gray and sickly yellow at the edges. Ronan was waiting outside the station, pacing, his rifle in his hands even though he probably didn't know what he'd shoot. When he saw me, the relief on his face was overwhelming. Jesus Christ, Cole, I thought, I know. He saw the knife in my hand, still faintly warm. Saw something in my expression that made him stop short. You went in, he said quietly. Yeah. And you came back. Yeah. We went inside. I told him everything. About the ice figure, about falling through again, about what I'd seen beneath the lake. He listened without interrupting, his face growing paler with each detail. When I finished, he was quiet for a long time. We need to leave, he finally said. Both of us. This sector, this whole region. We need to request immediate transfers and never come back. It won't matter, don't you see? It's not about location anymore. We've seen it. We carry it with us now. The pattern. Then what do? We warn people. We document everything. We make sure that anyone who comes after us knows what's out there. They'll think we're insane. Probably, but maybe someone will believe. Maybe someone will be smart enough to stay away from that lake. We spent the next week writing reports. Everything we'd experienced. Everything we'd seen. We included Pritchard's files, the trail camera footage, the indigenous legends. We made copies and sent them to Regional Command, to Park Service headquarters, to universities that studied anomalous phenomena. Most were ignored. A few generated polite responses about stress-related hallucinations and the psychological effects of extreme isolation. One professor from a university in Anchorage wanted to interview us, but his funding got pulled before he could make the trip. The official position was that Pritchard had died in an unfortunate ice-related accident, that Ronan and I had experienced severe psychological distress due to isolation, that Lake Stillwater was safe for experienced winter travelers who took proper precautions. A team was scheduled to visit in April after the ice began to melt to do a full safety assessment. Ronan and I both requested transfers. Mine was approved immediately. They were probably glad to get rid of me. His took longer. They wanted him to stay through the assessment to guide the visiting team. I tried to convince him to refuse, to just leave, but he was stubborn. "Someone needs to be here," he said. "Someone who knows what to watch for. What if they go to the lake? Then I'll stop them, or I'll go with them and make sure they come back." We both knew that was unlikely, but I understood the impulse, the need to protect people, even from things we couldn't fully explain or understand. I left Alaska in early March. The flight south felt like waking from a long nightmare. Each mile of distance should have made the pull weaker, should have loosened the hook in my mind. It didn't. Even now, thousands of miles away, I can feel it. Lake Stillwater. The presence beneath the ice. The endless spiral calling me back. I don't sleep well anymore. When I do, I dream in impossible geometries. Spirals that exist in more dimensions than 3. Patterns that hurt to see but are beautiful beyond description. And always that cold blue light pulsing with a 3-beat rhythm. Thud, thud, thud. I tried to resume normal life. Got a new posting in a state park in Oregon, all temperate forests and tourist facilities and none of the isolation that broke me in Alaska. But it doesn't feel right. This world, the normal world, feels thin now, like a soap bubble, fragile and temporary. I know what's underneath reality now. I've seen the structure that holds everything together, the cold mathematics that govern existence when you strip away the warm chaos of life. And I know that I'll go back. Not right away, maybe not for years. But eventually, the pull will become too strong to resist. I'll board a plane to Anchorage, rent a snowmobile, and ride back to that frozen expanse under the aurora borealis. Maybe I'll be strong enough to resist, like I was last time. Or maybe I'll walk onto the ice and keep walking until I reach the center, and the ice will open beneath me, and I'll sink into those spirals and finally understand. Sometimes I wonder if Pritchard felt this way in his final days. If he knew what would happen when he walked onto that lake. If he made the choice consciously, or if the choice had already been made for him the moment he saw his first spiral in the snow. I got one last message from Ronan in April, a brief text. Team arrived, taking them to lake tomorrow. Weather good, don't worry. I tried to call him. No answer. I tried the station. No answer. I contacted Regional Command. They said the assessment team had completed their work and reported no anomalies. Lake Stillwater was deemed safe. All team members had returned healthy, but when I asked to speak with Ronan specifically, I got transferred around for 20 minutes before someone finally told me, Ranger Hale submitted his transfer request last week. It was approved. He's no longer in Alaska. I tried to find him. Called every ranger station between Alaska and California. Sent emails. Left messages. Nothing. It's been 6 months since then. Sometimes I tell myself that Ronan made it out, that he's somewhere living a quiet life, trying to forget like I'm trying to forget. But I know better. I think he's still there, walking onto the ice every night at 3:47 a.m., standing in the center for 6 hours, an echo, a pattern, another piece of data for the presence to study. And one day, maybe next winter, maybe in 5 winters, maybe in 20, I'll be there too. Because the ice always calls back those who've seen what lies beneath. And eventually, we all answer. The sound of a tent zipper is distinct. It has a specific rhythm, a particular metallic rasp that's unmistakable once you've heard it enough times. In my 3 years as a park ranger in the Brooks Range, I'd heard that sound thousands of times. Campers arriving, departing, middle-of-the-night bathroom trips. But I'd never heard it like this. It was 2:47 a.m. when I first registered the sound. I was on night patrol, making my rounds through the Clearwater Flats camping zone, a remote section of wilderness about 90 miles north of the Arctic Circle. This time of year, mid-November, we shouldn't have had any campers at all. The season officially ended in September. Anyone still out here was either a researcher with special permits or someone who'd ignored multiple warnings about winter conditions. My name is Alyssa Greystone, and I'd taken the night shift voluntarily. Most rangers hated it. The darkness, the cold, the isolation. But I preferred it to dealing with tourists during the summer months. At night, it was just me, the landscape, and the silence. Except tonight, the silence was broken by that sound. Zeev. Clear as day. A tent zipper being pulled open. I stopped my snowmobile and killed the engine. The sudden quiet was absolute. In November, in the Brooks Range, you get maybe 2 hours of dim twilight that passes for daylight. The rest is darkness so complete it feels physical. My headlamp cut a weak cone of light through the black, illuminating nothing but falling snow. I listened. Nothing. Just wind and the soft whisper of snow against my parka. I checked my GPS. The nearest designated campsite was about 200 yards northeast. Site 7, according to my map. I radioed back to base. Greystone to Coldfoot Station. I'm at Clearwater Flats. Possible unauthorized camper at Site 7, going to investigate. The response came back crackling with static. Copy that, Greystone. Be advised, no permits issued for that sector. Use caution. I started the snowmobile and headed toward Site 7. The campsite was a small clearing surrounded by sparse black spruce, their skeletal branches heavy with snow. My headlamp swept across the area, and there it was. A tent. Dark green, modern design, dome style. Rated for extreme cold by the look of it. I parked and approached on foot, my boots crunching in the snow. Park ranger, anyone here? No response. The tent's rainfly flapped slightly in the wind, but the main body appeared sealed. I walked around it, checking for any sign of occupants. No footprints leading away, no gear outside, no signs of a fire or cooking. This is Park Ranger Greystone. If you're in there, I need you to come out. You're camping without a permit in closed season. Silence. I knelt by the entrance and examined the zipper. It was closed, completely closed all the way around, but I'd heard it open, I was certain. Using my flashlight, I checked the area around the tent. Fresh snow had covered most tracks, but I could see faint depressions, boot prints, leading from the direction of the access trail to the tent. And then, nothing. No prints leading away. Whoever set up this tent had walked here and then vanished. I keyed my radio. Greystone to Coldfoot. I've got an abandoned tent at Site 7, signs of recent occupation but no camper present. Requesting backup to secure the area. More static. Then, "Copy. Be advised, Ranger Carlsberg is en route from the Northern Patrol. ETA 40 minutes. Maeve Carlsberg. Good. She was one of the few rangers who didn't mind the winter assignments. We'd worked together before, solid, reliable, not prone to panic. I decided to wait before opening the tent. Protocol said to secure the scene, wait for backup when dealing with potential missing person situations. But those 40 minutes felt like hours. I kept my flashlight trained on the tent, watching for any movement. The wind picked up, making the fabric ripple and snap. Every sound made me jump. And underneath it all, I couldn't shake the memory of that zipper sound. I'd heard it. I was certain I'd heard it. 20 minutes in, I heard it again. Zip, the same sound, the same direction. But the tent was still sealed. I walked around it again, checking every seam, every panel. Nothing had opened, nothing had moved. "Hello?" My voice sounded small in the vast darkness. No answer. I pulled out my camera and started documenting. Photos of the tent from every angle. Photos of the footprints that led to it and stopped. Photos of the surrounding area. When I reviewed the images on my camera's screen, something caught my attention. In one of the wider shots, you could see the footprints more clearly. They didn't just stop at the tent. They curved. Starting from the trail, curving in an arc around the tent, and then ending. Like whoever made them had walked in a semicircle and simply ceased to exist at the apex. My radio crackled. "Greystone, this is Carlsberg. I'm about 5 minutes out. Status? Unchanged. Tent is sealed. No sign of occupant. But Maeve, the tracks are wrong. They don't make sense. Wrong how? They curve around in a half circle and disappear. No prints going out." A pause. "I'm almost there. Don't enter the tent until I arrive." Those 5 minutes crawled by. I kept circling the site, trying to find an explanation. Maybe the wind had filled in the departing tracks, but the arriving tracks were still visible, and they looked recent. Maybe the person had backtracked in their own prints. But the snow conditions weren't right for that. Each footfall had left a distinct impression. Maeve's headlight appeared through the trees, and relief flooded through me. Her snowmobile pulled up beside mine, and she climbed off. A tall woman in her mid-30s with sharp features and eyes that missed nothing. "Show me," she said. I walked her through it. The tent, the zipper sound I'd heard twice, the footprints that curved and ended. Maeve, crouched by the tracks, examining them with her flashlight. "These are fresh. Last few hours, maybe." "I know." She followed the curve of the prints, her light tracking their path. When she reached the point where they ended, she stopped. For a long moment, she didn't move. "Maeve, there's something here." She was looking at the snow where the last footprint ended. "Come look." I joined her. At first, I didn't see what she was seeing. Just disturbed snow, the last boot print, and then smooth surface beyond. Then she angled her light differently, and I saw it. A depression in the snow, not a footprint. Something else. A long, shallow groove, like something had been dragged. Starting from the last boot print and extending about 3 feet before fading into undisturbed snow. "What is that?" I asked. "I don't know, but it looks like someone fell or was pulled." We looked at each other. The wind had died down, and in the sudden stillness I became aware of how isolated we were. Miles from the nearest road. Miles from anyone who could help if something went wrong. "We need to check the tent," Maeve said. We approached together. Maeve pulled out a folding knife, standard issue for rangers, and made a small cut in the side panel near the bottom. Not ideal for preserving evidence, but safer than opening the main zipper if someone potentially hostile was inside. She shined her light through the gap. "Empty," she said after a moment. completely empty. She widened the cut, and we both looked inside. The tent was indeed empty, but it wasn't unused. There was a sleeping bag, still laid out, a small backpack in one corner, a camping stove, and on the floor of the tent, arranged in a neat circle, were 7 stones. Just stones. River rocks, by the look of them. Smooth, dark, each about the size of a fist. Arranged in a perfect circle, each one equidistant from the others. "That's not normal camping behavior," I said quietly. Maeve pulled out her camera and documented everything. Then, she carefully opened the main zipper from the inside and we entered properly. The sleeping bag was cold, the stove unused. The backpack contained standard camping gear, clothes, food, a water filter. But there was no identification. No wallet, no phone, no permits or papers. And tucked into the backpack's front pocket, we found a notebook. Maeve opened it carefully. The pages were covered in handwriting, neat, small, precise. But it wasn't English, or any language I recognized. Just symbols, geometric shapes, repeating patterns, angular designs that hurt to look at for too long. Page after page of symbols. "We need to bag this as evidence," Maeve said. "This whole scene needs to be processed properly." Agreed. But processed for what? Missing person? Abandoned campsite? I don't know yet. We secured the tent and its contents, marking everything for the evidence team that would come in daylight. Then we expanded our search, looking for any sign of where the camper might have gone. The disturbed snow pattern, that drag mark, led away from the tent for about 20 feet before disappearing entirely. Not fading gradually like tracks filling with snow. Just ending. Like someone had drawn a line and said, "Reality stops here." "This doesn't make sense," I said. "No," Maeve agreed. "It doesn't." We searched for another hour, widening our circle, looking for any clue. We found nothing. No tracks, no disturbances, no signs of struggle or flight. Just that one curved set of footprints leading to the tent, and that one drag mark leading nowhere. At 5:30 a.m., we gave up for the night. Maeve radioed base with a full report while I secured a perimeter around the campsite with evidence tape. Not that it would do much in a wilderness area, but protocol was protocol. "Command wants us back at base for debriefing," Maeve said when she finished the call. "Say our team will be deployed at first light search and rescue for someone who might not have been lost so much as vanished." We rode back to Coldfoot Station in convoy, our headlights cutting twin paths through the darkness. The whole way, I kept thinking about that zipper sound. How certain I'd been that I'd heard it. How impossible it was that I actually had. Coldfoot Station was a cluster of buildings huddled against the Arctic cold. Dormitory, office, garage, storage. In summer, it bustled with rangers and researchers. In November, it was just us and a skeleton crew. Maeve and I made up 2/3 of the winter patrol team. The third, Derek Haynes, was on his days off in Fairbanks. We filed our reports, then sat in the break room with coffee that tasted like motor oil, waiting for the sun to maybe rise. "You really heard the zipper?" Maeve asked. "Both times? I know how it sounds. I'm not doubting you. I'm just trying to understand the sequence. You heard it, investigated, found the tent sealed. Heard it again, tent still sealed. Then I arrived, and we found what we found. What do you think happened?" She was quiet for a long time, staring into her coffee. "I think someone set up that tent, arranged those stones, and then walked out in a semicircle and disappeared. And I think whatever happened to them, it wasn't natural." "You mean like foul play?" "I mean, I don't know what I mean. But those symbols in the notebook, the stones in a circle. the way the tracks just stop. None of it adds up to a normal camping trip gone wrong. I pulled out my phone and looked at the photos I'd taken. The tent, the stones, the curved footprints. In the harsh LED light of the break room, they looked almost mundane. Just a campsite. Just rocks. Just tracks. But I could still hear that zipper sound in my mind. Zeep. Clear. Distinct. Impossible. The SAR team deployed at 8 a.m., 6 rangers and 2 dog teams, equipped for cold weather search operations. Maeve and I were ordered to rest, but neither of us could sleep. We sat in the communications room, monitoring the radio chatter as the teams scoured the area around Site 7. They found nothing. No tracks beyond the ones we documented. No signs of anyone in the surrounding wilderness. The dogs picked up a scent at the tent and followed it along the curved path to the endpoint, then lost it completely. One of the dog handlers radioed in, sounding confused. It's like the scent just stops. The dogs are going in circles. They can't find a trail to follow. By 2 p.m., they'd expanded the search to a 2-mile radius. Still nothing. By 5 p.m., darkness was falling again, and the teams had to return to base. They'd found nothing. No body, no signs of struggle, no evidence of where the camper had gone. It was like they'd simply ceased to exist. That night, I volunteered for patrol again. Maeve tried to convince me to rest, but I couldn't. The thought of sitting in my bunk staring at the ceiling was worse than being out in the darkness. "At least, let me come with you," she said. We rode out together, heading back toward Clearwater Flats. The temperature had dropped to 20 below, and the wind had picked up, driving needles of ice into any exposed skin. Site 7 was still marked with our evidence tape, the tent standing dark and silent. We didn't approach it. Instead, we expanded our patrol, checking the other designated sites in the area. Site 8, empty. Site 9, empty. Site 6, empty. All as they should be. No unauthorized campers. No mysterious tents. We were heading back towards Site 7 when we heard it. Both of us this time. There was no question, no possibility of mishearing. Zeep! The sound of a tent zipper opening, clear and close, coming from the direction of Site 5. We looked at each other. Maeve keyed her radio. "All units, this is Carlsberg. Greystone and I are investigating possible activity at Site 5. Requesting backup." "Copy that. Be advised, you're the only patrol in that sector. Closest backup is 40 minutes out." We approached Site 5 carefully, our headlights off, moving slowly. The site came into view, and there was a tent. Blue this time, smaller than the green one at Site 7, but definitely there, and standing beside it, illuminated by a small lantern, was a person. Relief flooded through me. A person, an actual, physical person. Not a ghost, not a hallucination. Someone we could question, someone who could explain what was happening. "Park Service," Maeve called out. "Please stay where you are." The figure turned toward us. In the dim glow of the lantern, I could see it was a woman, maybe in her 40s, wearing heavy winter gear. "Thank God," the woman said. "I thought I was going crazy out here." We approached, and the woman's face came into focus. She looked terrified. "What's your name?" Maeve asked, her voice calm and professional. Sarah Mitchell. I have a permit. I can show you. But something's wrong. Something's very wrong." "What do you mean?" Sarah's hands were shaking. "I've been trying to leave for 3 hours. I pack up my tent, I start walking toward the trail, and then I'm back here, every time. Like I never moved, like the forest just loops." Maeve and I exchanged glances. "Show us your permit," I said. Sarah fumbled in her pocket and pulled out a folded paper. I examined it in my flashlight beam. It looked legitimate. A research permit issued 2 weeks ago, authorizing winter camping for geological survey work. Okay, Sarah, can you show us what you mean about trying to leave? She nodded and started packing her gear. We watched as she collapsed her tent, stuffed it in her pack, and oriented herself toward the trail. It's this direction, right? Northwest? Yes, Maeve confirmed. Sarah started walking. We followed, our lights tracking her movement. She walked in a straight line, at a steady pace, covering maybe 50 yards. Then she stopped. "What's wrong?" I called out. Sarah turned around slowly. Her face was pale. "I'm back." I looked around. She was right. We were standing at Site 5 again, right where we'd started, but we'd walked northwest. We should be 50 yards away from the site. "That's not possible," Maeve said. "I know," Sarah whispered, "but it keeps happening. I've tried 6 times now, every direction. I always end up back here." I pulled out my GPS unit and checked our coordinates. According to the device, we hadn't moved. We were at exactly the same location as when Sarah started walking. But I'd watched her walk 50 yards. I'd counted my own steps following her. We should have moved. "Maeve," I said quietly, "check your GPS." She did. Her face went pale. "Same. No movement recorded." "We walked," I said. "We definitely walked." "I know." Sarah was starting to panic. "What's happening? Why can't I leave? Why does space keep folding back on itself?" I didn't have an answer. This violated every law of physics I understood. You couldn't walk in a straight line and end up where you started. Not in flat terrain. Not in reality. Unless reality was doing something very wrong. "Okay," Maeve said, forcing calm into her voice. "Let's try together. All 3 of us. We'll walk northwest, maintain radio contact with base, have them track our GPS signal." She radioed the plan to Coldfoot Station. They confirmed they were tracking our signals. We started walking. Sarah in front, Maeve and me on either side. I counted steps. 50 steps. 100. 200. My GPS still showed no movement. 300 steps. The terrain should be changing. We should be seeing different trees, different landmarks, but everything looked the same. The same snow, the same sparse spruce, the same darkness. At 500 steps, we stopped. "Coldfoot, what's our position?" Maeve asked. The response made my blood run cold. "You're stationary at Site 5. You haven't moved since you started walking." I turned around slowly. In the distance, maybe 100 yards away, I could see a small light. Sarah's lantern. Still at Site 5. We'd walked 500 steps in a straight line and traveled in a perfect circle back to our starting point. "This isn't real," Sarah said, her voice rising. "This can't be real. Space doesn't work like this." But apparently, tonight it did. We stood there in the darkness, 3 people trapped in an impossible loop, and I realized with growing horror that we were experiencing the same thing that had happened to the person at Site 7, the person who had walked in a curved path and disappeared. We just couldn't see the curve from inside it. "Everyone, stop moving," Maeve said, her voice tight with controlled panic. "We need to think this through." We stood in a tight circle, our flashlight beams crossing in the darkness. My heart was hammering so hard I could feel it in my throat. "The tent at Site 7, I said slowly. "The footprints that curved around and stopped. We're doing the same thing, aren't we? We're walking what we think is a straight line, but we're actually moving in a circle." "Spatial distortion," Sarah said. Her voice was shaking, but her words were precise, scientific. Like curved space-time around a massive object, but localized, contained to this area. That's not possible without a massive gravitational source, Maeve said. And there's nothing out here but permafrost and bedrock. Then explain what just happened, Sarah shot back. Explain how we walked 500 steps and ended up exactly where we started. We couldn't. There was no explanation. Not a rational one. My radio crackled. Coldfoot Station to Carlsberg. We're showing some anomalous readings on our end. Your GPS signals are flickering, going in and out. Can you confirm your position? Maeve looked at me. In the harsh light of our flashlights, I could see fear in her eyes. Real fear. I'd worked with Maeve for 2 years and had never seen her rattled. We're not sure, Coldfoot, she said into the radio. GPS is showing Site 5, but we've been walking for 10 minutes. We should be half a mile from the site by now. Understood. We're dispatching a rescue team. ETA 90 minutes. 90 minutes, alone in the dark with space doing impossible things around us. What about the person from Site 7? I asked. If they got caught in the same thing, where did they go? They didn't just walk in circles forever, they disappeared. No one had an answer. Sarah pulled her pack off and sat down in the snow. I need to think. There has to be a rational explanation. Some kind of natural phenomenon we're not aware of. Like what? I asked. I don't know. Magnetic anomalies? Underground cave systems creating acoustic illusions that make distances seem different than they are. We're not using sound to navigate, Maeve pointed out. We're using GPS, which relies on satellite signals, and our own eyes. We're all experiencing the same thing. Mass hallucination? From what cause? Sarah didn't have an answer. I walked a few feet away from the group and pulled out my phone. No signal, normal for this area, but I had offline maps downloaded. I pulled them up and checked our logged position. Site 5 was marked clearly. According to my phone's internal GPS, we were standing exactly on top of it. But I could see the distant glow of Sarah's lantern at least 100 yards away, which meant we'd moved. We had to have moved, unless the lantern had moved with us, unless all our reference points were shifting together, maintaining their relative positions while the absolute positions changed. That made my head hurt. Maeve, I called out. Can you see Site 7 from here? She pulled out her binoculars and scanned the horizon. No, too dark, too much terrain in the way. Why? Just trying to establish fixed reference points, something that can't move. In this area? Good luck. Everything's snow and trees. I thought about the stars, but cloud cover had rolled in. No celestial navigation available. We were trapped in a bubble of uncertainty, where every direction led back to the starting point. We need to try something different, I said. What if we don't walk in a straight line? What if we deliberately curve our path? That doesn't make sense, Sarah said. If straight lines are turning into circles, curving would just make it worse. Maybe. Or maybe we're thinking about this wrong. Maybe we need to move perpendicular to the distortion instead of through it. Maeve considered this. It's worth trying, but how do we know which direction is perpendicular? Good question. I looked at Sarah's tent, still packed away in her backpack. When you set up camp, did you notice anything unusual? Any reason you chose Site 5 specifically? It was the first designated site I reached. I was tired. It was getting dark. I just wanted to stop. Nothing strange about the area itself? No weird sounds? No visual anomalies? She thought about it. Now that you mention it, the ground here felt different. Softer, almost. like the permafrost wasn't as frozen as it should be. I had to adjust my tent stakes. Maeve and I looked at each other. Permafrost that wasn't properly frozen could indicate geothermal activity, hot springs, underground heat sources, or something else. "Let's do a perimeter check," Maeve said. "Mark out the extent of this effect. See how far we can move before we loop back." We started walking in different directions, calling out distances. I went north, Maeve went south, Sarah went east. We each counted steps, radioing our positions. At exactly 500 steps, I felt it, a subtle resistance, like walking into a gentle headwind. Not physical pressure, but something else, a sensation of wrongness. I pushed through it, and suddenly I was back at the center standing next to Sarah's lantern. The radio crackled. "I just looped," Maeve reported, 500 steps south. "Same here," Sarah confirmed. 500 steps east. 500 steps in every direction. We were trapped in a circle approximately 500 steps in radius, and right at the center was Site 5. "It's centered on the campsite," I said. "Or, more specifically, on wherever someone sets up a tent." "But there was no distortion before," Sarah protested. "I camped here last night with no problems. I was able to walk to the research area this morning, collect samples, come back. Everything was normal. It only started happening tonight." "What time did it start?" "Around 10 p.m. I was getting ready for bed when I noticed my GPS acting weird. Thought it was just signal loss. Then I tried to walk to a better vantage point and looped back." 10 p.m. I'd heard the first zipper sound at 2:47 a.m. at Site 7, where the first tent had been. "The person at Site 7, I said slowly. "When do you think they set up camp?" Maeve checked her notes from the investigation. Based on the snow accumulation and the condition of the site, probably yesterday evening, maybe 8 or 9 p.m. "And when did I hear the zipper sound? After 2 a.m., 5 or 6 hours later." "You think there's a delay?" Maeve asked. "Something that happens after the tent has been in place for a certain amount of time. Or something that gets stronger over time, builds up." Sarah's face had gone pale. "If that's true, then we're in danger. Real danger. Because I set up my tent at 6 p.m. yesterday. That's 20 hours ago." We all fell silent. The person at Site 7 had disappeared. We'd found evidence of them setting up camp, evidence of them trying to leave. And then nothing. Just empty space where a person should be. If the effect was getting stronger, if we were approaching the same critical point, "We need to destroy the tent," Sarah said suddenly. "Break whatever's causing this." "We don't know the tent is causing it," Maeve objected. "What else? The effect is centered on the campsite, both sites, and it started hours after the tent was erected. The tent is the only common factor." It made a certain logic, and we didn't have many other options. Sarah pulled the tent from her pack and threw it on the ground. She pulled out a lighter, but the fabric was treated with fire retardant. It wouldn't catch. "Cut it," I said, pulling out my knife. "Destroy it completely." We went at the tent like it was a living thing that needed killing, slashing the fabric, breaking the poles, tearing everything into pieces. It was probably crazy, probably useless, but it felt good to be taking action instead of waiting for something terrible to happen. When we were done, the tent was nothing but scraps of fabric and bent aluminum. "Now, let's try walking out," Maeve said. We started north, the three of us together, counting steps. My radio crackled. "Coldfoot Station to field team. We're now reading your position as mobile, moving northwest from Site 5. Hope surged through me. It worked. Destroying the tent broke whatever was 500 steps. the sensation of wrongness, the subtle resistance. I pushed through, and we were back at Site 5, standing in front of the destroyed tent. "No," Sarah whispered. "No, that should have worked." "Maybe it's not the tent itself," I said, my mind racing. "Maybe the tent is just a marker, a way to designate a location. What matters is that someone deliberately chose to camp here. Then what causes the distortion?" I thought about the notebook we'd found at Site 7, the symbols, the stones arranged in a circle. "Sarah, when you made camp, did you arrange anything? Mark out your site in any specific way?" "No, I found the flattest spot and set up my tent." "Nothing else? You didn't move any rocks, clear any area in a particular pattern?" "Well, I did move some rocks. There were a bunch of them right where I wanted to put the tent. I moved them to the side." "Show me." She led us to a spot about 10 feet from where the tent had been. In the snow, barely visible, was a circle of stones. 7 of them, arranged in the same pattern we'd seen at Site 7. "You didn't put these here?" Maeve asked. "No, they were here when I arrived. I moved them to make room for the tent, then put them back after, just to, I don't know, leave the site as I found it. Environmental responsibility." The stones were dark, smooth river rocks, each about fist-sized, arranged in a perfect circle. "These were at Site 7 too," I said. "Inside the tent." "What if it's not about the tent at all?" Maeve said slowly. "What if it's about the stones? Someone is arranging these circles and they're causing, what? Spatial distortions?" "That's insane," Sarah said. "Rocks can't bend space. Neither can tents. But here we are, trapped in an impossible loop." I knelt down and examined the stones more closely. In the beam of my flashlight, I could see that they weren't just smooth. They had markings, tiny scratches on the surface too regular to be natural weathering. Symbols, the same symbols from the notebook. "Someone carved these," I said, "deliberately marked them and placed them here." "Who?" Maeve asked. "And why?" I didn't have an answer, but a horrible thought was forming in my mind. What if the person at Site 7 hadn't been a victim? What if they'd been the one setting this up? Creating these stone circles, waiting for them to activate and then, what, entering the distortion deliberately? And if that was true, if someone was creating these zones intentionally, then Sarah had unknowingly restored one. Put the stones back in their active configuration. "We need to disrupt the circle," I said. I reached for one of the stones. The moment my fingers touched it, I felt it. A vibration. So subtle, I almost missed it. Like a tuning fork struck at the very edge of hearing. And in that instant, I understood. The stones weren't causing the distortion. They were containing it, marking the boundary, warning others away. Someone, the person at Site 7 maybe, or someone before them, had found these places where space did impossible things, natural anomalies, and they'd marked them. The circles weren't creating the effect. They were trying to control it, and we were standing right in the middle of one. I jerked my hand back from the stone. "Don't touch them." "Why not?" Maeve asked. Before I could answer, the sound came again. Zeep. Louder this time, clearer. And it wasn't coming from any specific direction. It was coming from all around us, from the air itself. The zipper sound, the sound of something opening, not a tent, not fabric, reality. Sarah screamed. Maeve grabbed my arm, and I watched as the darkness around us began to change. It wasn't getting darker, it was getting deeper, like the black between the stars was pressing closer, filling in the spaces between molecules. And at the edge of my vision, I could see something else. Light, but not normal light. Geometric light. Angular, crystalline, moving in patterns that hurt to follow. The same patterns from the notebook, the same symbols carved on the stones. "Run," Maeve said. "Just run, any direction. Now." We ran, I don't know which direction. I don't think direction mattered anymore. The geometry around us was folding, twisting, becoming something other than Euclidean space. My GPS was screaming errors. My compass was spinning. The stars, when I could glimpse them through breaks in the clouds, were in the wrong positions. We ran for what felt like hours, but was probably minutes, and with every step, I could feel the wrongness intensifying. Space stretching and compressing like rubber, time hiccuping, stuttering. At some point, I realized Sarah wasn't with us anymore. "Maeve, where's Sarah?" She was right behind us. We stopped, spun around. Sarah was gone, just Maeve and me in the darkness and the impossible geometry. "Sarah!" I screamed into the radio. "Sarah, do you copy?" Static, then faintly, I don't know where I am. Everything's wrong. The angles are wrong. I can see your lights, but you're in 3 places at once, and the transmission cut off." "Coldfoot, we have a lost team member," Maeve said into her radio, her voice professional despite the panic I could see in her eyes. "Sarah Mitchell, last seen at coordinates." She looked at her GPS. I don't know where we are." The response came back broken, distorted. Reading, multiple signals, same location, interference, sending rescue. Maeve looked at me. "We have to find her." "How? We can't even find ourselves." Then we stop running. We think. We figure this out. She was right. Panic wouldn't help. We needed to be smarter than this. I forced myself to stop, to breathe, to observe. What was actually happening here? Space was curved, looped back on itself. But it wasn't random. There was structure to it. Pattern. The circles, the 7 stones, 7 points. Maeve. In the circle of stones, how were they arranged? Just random spacing, or was there a pattern? She pulled up the photos on her camera, zooming in on the stones. Even spacing, like points on a clock face, but with 7 instead of 12. 7-fold symmetry. That's not common in nature. It's deliberately mathematical. So maybe that's the key. The stones mark 7 points. Maybe there are 7 stable positions within the distortion. Safe spots where space isn't folded. That's a huge assumption. You have a better idea? She didn't. I tried to remember the exact layout of the stones. If we'd been standing at the center when the effect activated, and if the stones marked stable points at the perimeter. "We need to move perpendicular to our current path," I said. "Not forward or back, but at an angle." "Which angle?" "I don't know. We try different ones until we find something stable." It was a terrible plan, but it was all we had. We started moving at what I thought was a 45-degree angle from our previous direction. Immediately, the sensation of wrongness intensified. The angles around us twisted harder, became more acute. "Wrong way," I gasped. We adjusted, trying a different angle. Better. The wrongness decreased slightly. We kept adjusting, using the intensity of the spatial distortion as a guide. Warmer, colder, like some nightmarish game of navigation. After what felt like an eternity, we found it. A direction where the wrongness minimized. Not gone, but reduced to a tolerable level. "There," Maeve said. "That feels better. More normal." We walked carefully in that direction. 50 steps, 100. My GPS flickered, then stabilized. I checked our position. We were moving. Actually moving, putting distance between ourselves and Site 5. "It's working," I said. We continued, maintaining our heading. The geometric light faded. The darkness became normal darkness again. Space stopped feeling like it was made of folded paper. After 500 steps, we emerged from the distortion completely. My GPS showed we were approximately 700 yards from Site 5. We'd made it out, but Sarah hadn't. "Coldfoot, this is Carlsberg," Maeve said into her radio. "Greystone and I have exited the affected area. We're mobile, but Sarah Mitchell is still inside. We need immediate SAR deployment." "Copy that. Teams are en route. What's your status?" "Physically okay, but Coldfoot." She paused, looked at me. "We need to talk about what's happening at Site 5. This isn't a normal SAR situation." "Understood. Return to base for debrief. SAR will take over the search." We should have returned to base. That was protocol. But I couldn't leave Sarah out there trapped in whatever that distortion was. "I'm going back," I said. "Alyssa, no." We barely made it out. Sarah doesn't know the trick. She doesn't know about the angles. She needs help. "And you think you can navigate back in there, find her, and get both of you out?" "I have to try." Maeve grabbed my arm. "If you go back in there, you might not come out. You might end up like the person from Site 7, just gone, vanished. Maybe. But I can't leave her." We stared at each other in the darkness. Finally, Maeve sighed. "Then we both go, but we rope together. If one of us gets lost, the other can anchor." We had 100 feet of climbing rope in our emergency kit. We tied ourselves together at the waist, leaving about 50 feet between us. "If the rope goes taut and I can't see you, I pull. You follow, no arguments." "Agreed." We approached the distortion zone carefully. As we got closer, I could feel it again. That sensation of space doing wrong things. "Sarah!" I called out. "Sarah, can you hear me?" Nothing. Just the wind and the creaking of ice. We crossed the threshold. Immediately, my GPS went haywire. Space folded, but I was ready for it this time, watching the angles, feeling for the path of least wrongness. "This way," I said, adjusting our heading. We moved deeper into the distortion. My flashlight beam bent at impossible angles, reflecting off surfaces that shouldn't exist. Maeve's light, 50 feet behind me, seemed to be in multiple places at once. "Sarah!" A response, faint and distorted. "Here, I'm here." I followed the sound, adjusting our path to maintain that thread of stability. The rope behind me stayed slack. Good. Maeve was keeping up. "Keep talking, Sarah. Let me track your voice." I'm at the stones. The circle. I can't move. Every direction I try is wrong." Of course. The center of the distortion. The one place where space was most folded. We found her sitting in the middle of the stone circle, her knees pulled to her chest, shaking. Not from cold, from fear. "I can see things," she whispered. "In the angles. Shapes that can't. Don't look at them," I said firmly. "Look at me. Look at something real." I grabbed her hand and pulled her to her feet. "We're getting out of here. But you have to trust me completely. Do exactly what I say." She nodded, her eyes wide. "Okay, we're going to walk at this exact angle. Don't deviate. Don't look around, just follow me." I started moving, pulling Sarah with me. Maeve followed at the other end of the rope. We moved slowly, carefully, maintaining the heading that had worked before. 50 steps, 100. The wrongness began to decrease. 200 steps. My GPS flickered toward stability. 300 steps. Sarah screamed. I spun around. She was staring at something over my shoulder, something behind me in the distortion. Her face was white with terror. "Don't look," Maeve warned. "Alyssa, don't turn around." But I did. And I saw it. Not a shape, not a creature, but an absence, a void in reality shaped like a person. Where it stood, space didn't just fold, it broke, cracked like glass. And through those cracks, I could see other places, other times, maybe other universes, all the angles that shouldn't exist, all pressed together in the shape of something that might once have been human. The person from Site 7, not gone, not vanished, changed, trapped in the geometry, part of the pattern now, walking the circles, opening and closing the boundaries between here and elsewhere with the sound of a zipper that was really the sound of space tearing open. It took a step toward us. Where its foot touched the snow, reality fractured. "Run," I whispered. "Run now." We ran. We didn't look back. We just ran, following that narrow thread of stability through the distorted space. Behind us, I could hear it. Not footsteps, but something worse. The sound of reality breaking with each movement. Crack, 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 not following us, not chasing, just existing. And that existence was enough to shatter the world around it. The rope between me and Maeve went taut. I pulled. She stumbled forward, and I heard her gasp. "It's growing," she said. "The distortion. It's spreading." She was right. The zone of wrongness was expanding. What had been a 500-step radius was now larger, bleeding outward like ink in water. We ran harder. My lungs burned. The cold air felt like knives with every breath. Sarah was flagging, stumbling. I dragged her forward. "Almost there," I lied. I had no idea how close we were to the edge. My GPS was useless. All I had was instinct and the decreasing intensity of spatial distortion. 400 steps. 500. The angles began to normalize. The geometric light faded. 600 steps. We burst through the boundary like swimmers breaking the surface. Normal space. Normal darkness. Normal Alaska wilderness. We collapsed in the snow, gasping. Is it gone?" Sarah managed. I looked back. In the distance, I could see it. A shimmer in the darkness, like heat waves, but cold. The boundary of the distortion zone, visible now as a faint haze, and in the center of that haze, a dark shape, standing, waiting. "Not gone," I said, "but contained for now." Maeve was already on the radio. "Coldfoot, this is Carlsberg. We have Mitchell. All 3 rangers accounted for, but we have a major situation. Site 5 is experiencing a..." She paused, searching for words that wouldn't make her sound insane. "An environmental hazard. Unknown origin. Recommend immediate closure of the entire Clearwater Flats camping zone." The response was immediate. Nature of hazard. Spatial anomaly. Difficult to explain, but it's dangerous, deadly, and it's growing. A long pause, then, "Copy that. We're mobilizing emergency response. Return to base immediately." We helped Sarah to her feet and started the long ride back to Coldfoot Station. None of us spoke. What was there to say? We'd seen something impossible, something that broke the rules of reality. And worse, we'd seen what happened to someone who got caught in it permanently. The person from Site 7, transformed into a living tear in space-time, trapped forever, walking the boundaries of broken geometry. Back at base, we faced 3 hours of debriefing. Statements, reports, medical checks. Sarah was showing signs of shock and mild hypothermia. Maeve and I were physically fine but mentally shaken. The commanding officer, a hard-faced woman named Catherine Russo, listened to our reports with increasing skepticism. "Spatial distortion," she repeated. "You're telling me space itself is folding? At a campsite in the Brooks Range?" "I know how it sounds," Maeve said. "But our GPS logs will show it. We walked 500 steps and remained stationary. That's not equipment malfunction. That's impossible physics. Russo pulled up our GPS tracking data on her computer. Her expression changed as she reviewed it. This doesn't make sense. According to this, you were in 2 places at once. 3 even, multiple, simultaneous positions. Because space was curved, I explained. 1 physical location mapped to multiple coordinate sets. That's not how GPS works. That's not how anything works. I know, but it's what happened. Russo sat back, rubbing her temples. The Park Service doesn't have protocols for this. Avalanches, wildlife attacks, severe weather, yes. Spatial anomalies? No. What about the Geological Survey? Sarah spoke up. I'm here doing research on permafrost stability. Maybe there's something in the ground, gas pockets, mineral deposits, something that could cause, I don't know, magnetic interference. Strong enough to fool GPS satellites? Russo looked doubtful. I'm grasping at straws, but there has to be a scientific explanation. Did there? I wasn't so sure anymore. Some things existed outside the boundaries of science as we understood it. What about the person from Site 7? I asked. The one who disappeared. Do we have an ID yet? Russo pulled up a file. No identification was found at the site, but we ran the tent model and gear through our database. It matches equipment issued to a researcher named Marcus Venn, geophysicist, Cambridge University. He had permits for winter research in this area 3 weeks ago. Geophysicist, Sarah said. He was studying the ground. Maybe he found something. We're trying to contact him, but his university says he's in the field, out of communication. Expected back next week. Except he wouldn't be back. We'd seen what happened to him. He was still out there, trapped in broken geometry, transformed into something that could barely be called human. We need to quarantine the area, Maeve said. Not just Clearwater Flats, the whole sector. If the distortion is growing, we don't know that it is, Russo interrupted. We saw it expand. In the hour we were there, it grew by at least 100 yards. Russo looked at the GPS data again, her face grim. I'll contact Regional Command, get their input. In the meantime, Clearwater Flats is closed. No one goes near Sites 5 or 7 without direct authorization. It was a start, but I had a feeling it wouldn't be enough. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in my bunk, staring at the ceiling, replaying everything. The zipper sound, the curved footprints, the stone circles, the thing that had once been Dr. Marcus Venn. Around 3 a.m., I gave up on sleep and went to the common area. Maeve was already there, going through reference materials on a laptop. Can't sleep either? I asked. Every time I close my eyes, I see those angles, the geometric light, the way space just folded. I poured coffee and sat beside her. What are you researching? Trying to find precedent. Similar phenomena reported anywhere in the world. She turned the laptop to show me. There are stories, mostly dismissed as folklore or hallucination. The Devil's Sea in Japan, the Bermuda Triangle, the Michigan Triangle, the Bennington Triangle. All places where people disappear under mysterious circumstances, where space and time seem to act strangely. You think there's a connection? I think maybe there are places on Earth where the rules are different. Thin spots, where reality isn't as solid as we think. And someone, Dr. Venn maybe, figured out how to mark them, control them. Or tried to. The stone circles, the symbols, they're not random, they're deliberate, mathematical. I thought about the notebook we'd found, pages and pages of geometric symbols. What if he wasn't trying to control the anomalies? What if he was trying to enter them? Maeve looked at me. Why would anyone do that? To see what's on the other side, to understand. Scientists take risks. This isn't a risk, it's suicide. Maybe he didn't know that. Maybe he thought he could go in and come back out. But he couldn't. No, he couldn't. We sat in silence for a while. Then Maeve pulled up another file. There's something else. I went back through historical records for this area, mapped every reported disappearance in the Brooks Range over the last 50 years. She showed me a map covered in red dots, each one a missing person. Most were scattered randomly, people who got lost, fell, froze. The normal tragedies of wilderness. But some weren't random. Some formed a pattern. Clusters, 7 dots arranged in rough circles. And at the center of each cluster, a campsite. Oh my God, I whispered. It's been happening for decades, Maeve said. Maybe longer. People come to camp in certain spots and then they vanish. Not all of them, maybe 1 in 10, 1 in 20, but enough to show a pattern if you know what to look for. Why didn't anyone notice before? Because they were looking at individual cases, not the aggregate. Each disappearance was investigated separately, explained as accident or misadventure. No one connected them. Until now. Until now. I stared at the map. 7-point patterns, stone circles, spatial distortions. The circles aren't marking the anomalies, I said slowly. They're creating them, or maybe activating them. The stones are some kind of trigger. Put them in the right configuration, and the distortion begins. But why? What's the purpose? I didn't know, but I was starting to form a theory, a terrible theory. Maeve, what if it's not about studying the anomalies? What if it's about using them, creating doorways, passages to somewhere else? That's insane. Is it? We saw impossible geometry. We saw space folded into dimensions we can't perceive. What if those distortions aren't just anomalies? What if they're doorways, and Dr. Venn figured out how to open them? Then where do they lead? I don't know, but I know someone who might. Who? Sarah. She's a geologist, but she's been studying the same area as Dr. Venn. If he made any discoveries, filed any preliminary reports, she might have access. We found Sarah in her assigned quarters, also unable to sleep. When we explained our theory, her face went pale. Doorways, she repeated. You think he was trying to create doorways to other dimensions? Does that sound crazy? I asked. Yes, but no crazier than what we experienced tonight. She pulled out her own laptop. Venn published some preliminary findings 6 months ago. Barely got any attention. Too theoretical, too speculative. But he was documenting what he called localized spatial singularities. Places where the fabric of space-time seemed thinner than normal. She pulled up the paper. It was dense with mathematics, but the core idea was clear. Dr. Venn believed there were points on Earth's surface where dimensional barriers were weaker. And with the right configuration of materials, specifically stones with high concentrations of rare Earth elements arranged in specific geometric patterns, those barriers could be breached. He was trying to prove parallel universe theory, Sarah said, using natural geological anomalies as testing grounds. And he succeeded, Maeve said grimly. He opened a door, and then he went through it. Or it pulled him through, I added, remembering the drag marks in the snow. Maybe you can't control it once it opens. Maybe it takes you whether you want to go or not. Sarah scrolled through the more of Venn's research. He mentions other sites, other locations where he detected the same spatial thinning, all in remote areas, all places with... She stopped. What? All places with indigenous legends about disappearances, about spirits walking, about doorways between worlds. The same things Maeve had found in folklore databases. How many sites? I asked. Sarah checked the data. At least 20, scattered across Alaska, northern Canada, Siberia, all in Arctic or subarctic regions. And how many stone circles have been activated? I don't know. There's no way to tell without visiting each site. We know of 2, Maeve said. Sites 5 and 7, both showing active distortions. If even a fraction of the other 20 are also active. We looked at each other, the implications sinking in. 20 doorways. 20 tiers in reality. 20 places where space folded and people could slip through into... what? Other dimensions? Other universes? And worse, what if traffic could flow both ways? What if opening these doors didn't just let people out, but let something else in? I thought about the thing that had once been Dr. Venn, the way reality cracked around it, the geometric patterns visible through the tiers. We need to close them, I said. The distortions. We need to figure out how to shut them down before they spread. How? Sarah asked. We don't even understand how they work. The stones. They're the key. Arranged in a circle, they activate the distortion. So maybe disrupting the circle deactivates it. We tried that, Maeve reminded me. When we destroyed your tent, the distortion continued. But we didn't disrupt the stones themselves. We just moved around them, avoided them. You want to go back into that distortion and rearrange stones while reality is literally breaking around us. Put like that, it sounded suicidal. What's the alternative? Let it keep growing. Let it spread until the entire Brooks Range is an impassable zone of impossible geometry. No one had a better answer. At 6 a.m., we presented our findings to Commander Russo. She listened with increasing horror. You're telling me there could be 20 of these distortions active right now? At least, Sarah confirmed. Maybe more. Dr. Venn's research only covered the areas he could personally survey. There could be others. And your solution is to go back into the active zones and try to disrupt stone circles while space is falling apart? If we can break the geometric configuration, we might be able to collapse the distortion, I explained. It's a theory, but it's based on Venn's own research. The circles are mathematically precise. 7 stones in 7-fold symmetry. Disrupt that symmetry and the effect should fail. Should. It's the best option we have. Russo looked at the 3 of us like we were insane. Maybe we were. This is beyond Park Service jurisdiction, she said finally. I'm escalating to federal agencies, Geological Survey, maybe DARPA. People with actual expertise in whatever this is. That'll take days, Maeve protested. Weeks, maybe. And in the meantime, the distortion grows. People could wander into it, researchers, hikers, hunters, anyone. The area is closed. A closure sign won't stop a spatial distortion from expanding. Russo knew she was right. We all knew it. Give me 12 hours, she said finally. I'll try to get emergency authorization and support. In the meantime, you 3 are off duty. Rest, eat, prepare equipment. If we get approval, we attempt controlled disruption of the stone circle at Site 5 at 1800 hours. It was the best we could hope for. The next 12 hours were a blur of preparation. We gathered equipment, climbing rope, GPS trackers, cameras, emergency beacons. We studied Venn's research, trying to understand the mathematics behind the stone circles. Sarah worked on calculating the exact angle we'd need to approach from to minimize exposure to the distortion. At 1700 hours, we got word, authorization granted. A federal team was being assembled, but they wouldn't arrive for 3 days. In the meantime, we were cleared to attempt disruption of the Site 5 anomaly. 3 rangers, 1 researcher, against a tear in reality. We rode out as twilight began to dim the sky. The temperature had dropped to 30 below. The wind was picking up. Perfect conditions for disaster. As we approached Site 5, we could see it from half a mile away. The distortion had grown. What had been a shimmer was now visible as a definite boundary, a wall of fractured space like looking through broken glass at a funhouse mirror, and at the center, that dark shape. Dr. Venn, still walking his eternal circuit. "Remember the plan," Maeve said over the radio. "We approach from the northwest angle. That's the path of least distortion. Greystone goes in first, roped to me. She disrupts the stone circle while I anchor from outside the boundary. Sarah monitors from safe distance and coordinates extraction if things go wrong." "And if the distortion collapses while Alyssa is inside?" Sarah asked. No one had a good answer for that. I checked my gear one last time. Rope, ice axe, emergency beacon, GPS flashlight. And in my pocket, a small sledgehammer from the station's toolkit for breaking stones. "Ready?" Maeve asked. No, not even close, but I nodded anyway. We approached the boundary. Up close, it was even more disturbing. The air itself looked wrong, like it was made of angles instead of atmosphere. Through the fractured space, I could see glimpses of other places, landscapes that weren't Alaska, skies that weren't Earth's. On 3, I said. 1, 2, 3. I stepped through. The sensation was immediate and overwhelming. Space twisted around me. Up became down. Left became inside out. My stomach lurched. For a moment, I thought I'd be sick. Then I remembered the angle, the path of stability. I adjusted my heading, following the thread of least wrongness. The rope behind me stayed slack. Good. Maeve was maintaining position outside the boundary. I moved toward the center where the stone circle waited. Each step was a battle against geometry that didn't want me there. 50 yards. 100. Dr. Venn's shape became clearer. Not walking anymore, standing, watching me approach. Or what was left of Dr. Venn. Up close, I could see that he wasn't really there anymore. Not physically. He was more like a shadow burned into space itself. A human-shaped absence filled with broken angles and geometric light. I tried not to look directly at him. Looking too long at the impossible made my head hurt. The stone circle was ahead. 7 stones, perfectly spaced, each carved with those angular symbols. I approached the nearest stone and raised the sledgehammer. The moment the hammer touched the stone, everything changed. The distortion surged. The geometric light blazed. And Dr. Venn moved, not walked, moved, through space, ignoring distance. One moment he was 100 yards away, the next he was right beside me. This close, I could see through the cracks in reality that made up his form. See the other places, other times, other versions of space where physics worked differently. And I understood he wasn't trying to stop me, he was trying to warn me. Breaking the stones wouldn't close the distortion. It would make it permanent. I froze, the sledgehammer raised. Through the cracks in Dr. Venn's impossible form, I could see him, or the memory of him, reaching out, not threatening, pleading, "Don't." The word didn't come through sound. It came through the geometry itself, vibrating through the broken space. "Alyssa, what's happening?" Maeve's voice over the radio, distorted but audible. I couldn't answer. I was transfixed, staring at what Dr. Venn had become, understanding flooding through me. The stones weren't keeping the distortion open. They were keeping it controlled, contained. The sevenfold symmetry wasn't a door. It was a cage. And if I broke it, images flooded my mind. Not thoughts, not words, but pure information transmitted through fractured space-time. I saw what Dr. Venn had learned in his research. The thin places weren't random. They were natural features of reality, places where the dimensional membrane was weak. They'd always existed. Would always exist. The stone circles weren't creating the distortions. They were preventing them from spreading. Ancient knowledge. Indigenous peoples had figured it out millennia ago. 7 sacred stones to contain the thin places, to keep the doors from opening too wide, to prevent what lay beyond from pushing through. Dr. Venn had thought he understood, had thought he could control it, study it, maybe even cross through safely. He'd created new circles, trying to stabilize thin places that had never been properly contained. But he'd miscalculated, had activated a distortion without proper grounding. And when it had pulled him through, he'd become part of it, trapped in the between space, neither here nor elsewhere. A living warning scratched into reality. Now he was trying to warn me. Breaking the circle wouldn't close the distortion. It would remove the only thing keeping it from consuming everything. "Maeve," I said into the radio, my voice shaking. "Pull me out, now." "What? But the mission—" "Pull me out!" She pulled. The rope went taut, yanking me backward. I stumbled, fell, slid across the snow as Maeve hauled on the line. Dr. Venn's form watched me go. Then he turned and resumed his eternal walk, following the boundary of the contained distortion, a guardian born of his own mistake. I burst through the boundary and back into normal space, gasping. "What happened?" Maeve demanded. "Why didn't you break the stones?" "Because breaking them would make everything worse." I explained what I'd understood, the true nature of the stone circles, their purpose. Sarah listened with growing horror. "So you're saying these distortions are natural? They've always been here?" "Yes. The stones don't create them. They contain them, keep them from spreading. But Site 7, Maeve said. There was a stone circle there too, and it failed. The distortion escaped containment. Maybe the circle was damaged, or maybe— I thought about the footprints that had curved and ended. Maybe someone tried to remove the stones, thinking they were causing the effect. And without the circle intact, the distortion grew. We looked at each other, the implications sinking in. "The other sites," Sarah whispered. "If they all have stone circles, and people find them, think they're the problem, they'll destroy them," I finished, "and release contained distortions all across the Arctic." "We need to warn everyone," Maeve said, already reaching for her radio. But I grabbed her arm. "Wait, who do we warn? What do we tell them? That there are doorways to other dimensions scattered across Alaska, held closed by ancient stone arrangements. That disturbing them will tear holes in reality? The truth. They'll think we're insane, and even if they believe us, what then? Publicize the locations. That'll just attract more people. Researchers, thrill seekers, conspiracy theorists. The more attention we draw, the more likely someone will interfere with the circle. So, what do? Nothing?" I looked back at the distortion boundary, at Dr. Venn's shadow walking its perimeter. "We document, we protect, we make sure the circles stay intact." "How? We're 3 rangers and a geologist. We can't guard 20 sites across thousands of miles of wilderness." She was right, but what choice did we have? We returned to Coldfoot Station as dawn broke. Commander Russo was waiting, along with 2 people I didn't recognize, a man and woman in civilian clothes who had "Federal Agent" written all over them. "Rangers," Russo said formally. "This is Agent Morrison and Agent Keene from an agency that handles unusual situations. They'll be taking over the investigation." Agent Morrison stepped forward. He was mid-40s, gray at the temples, with eyes that had seen too much. "Thank you for your service, Rangers. Your reports have been noted. We'll take it from here." "Take what from here?" I asked. You're going to destroy the stone circles, aren't you? Try to close the distortions. Morrison's expression didn't change. That's classified. You can't. If you break the circles, the distortions will expand. They'll grow until they... Ranger Greystone, Morrison interrupted. I understand you've been through a traumatic experience. Spatial anomalies can cause confusion, hallucinations. We have specialists who can help you process what you think you saw. I know what I saw, and I know what those stone circles do. They're not the problem. They're the solution. That's not what the preliminary analysis suggests. What analysis? You just got here. Agent Keene spoke for the first time, her voice cold. We've been monitoring this situation for longer than you know. The circles show electromagnetic signatures consistent with active equipment. They're technological, not natural. Probably placed by foreign actors as part of some kind of experimental weapons system. I stared at her. You think someone built these circles? As weapons? We think they need to be neutralized for national security. You're making a mistake. A catastrophic mistake. That's above your pay grade, Ranger. Russo stepped in. My Rangers did their job. They reported a dangerous situation. What happens next is your responsibility. She looked at me. Stand down, Greystone. That's an order. I wanted to argue, wanted to grab these federal agents and shake them until they understood. But I saw it in their eyes. They'd already decided. They had their narrative. Foreign weapons, electromagnetic interference, technological threats. They couldn't accept the truth, that some things in this world existed beyond human understanding or control. How long do we have? I asked Morrison. Excuse me? Before you destroy the circles. How long? He hesitated. Operations begin at dawn tomorrow. All identified circle sites will be disrupted simultaneously. 20 stone circles, 20 contained distortions, all released at once. You'll kill us all, I said quietly. You're dismissed, Ranger. Maeve, Sarah, and I were escorted to our quarters and told to stay there pending psychiatric evaluation. They took our radios, our phones, our access to vehicles. We were prisoners. We have to warn someone, Sarah said once we were alone. The media, the scientific community, someone who can stop this. With what evidence? Maeve asked bitterly. GPS logs that show impossible positions? Testimony that we saw a man turned into living geometry? Photos of rocks arranged in a circle? Then what? We just wait for them to crack open 20 doorways to hell? I thought about Dr. Venn, walking his eternal circuit. About the glimpses I'd seen through the broken angles in his form. Other places, other dimensions, other versions of physics where humans couldn't survive. If 20 distortions were released simultaneously without containment, we have to get to the sites, I said. Before they do, protect the circles. How? We're under guard. And even if we escape, we can't reach 20 sites before dawn. No, but we can reach the closest ones, Site 5 and 7. Maybe a few others within snowmobile range. And do what? Stand in front of federal agents with explosives. If we have to. Maeve looked at me like I was crazy. Maybe I was. But I'd seen what happened when reality broke. I'd stood in the space between dimensions, and I knew that some barriers were meant to stay closed. At 2 a.m., we made our move. The guard outside our door had dozed off. Not surprising given the late hour and brutal cold. We slipped past him, made it to the equipment shed, grabbed snowmobiles and gear. By the time someone noticed we were gone, we were 10 miles away, racing through the darkness towards Site 5. We knew we couldn't stop what was coming, but maybe we could slow it down. Maybe we could protect a few sites long enough for someone to realize the mistake. Site 5 came into view. The distortion boundary was still there, still visible as fractured space, and Dr. Venn was still walking his circuit. But something was different. The boundary was flickering, weakening. "They've already started," Sarah said. "Some kind of electromagnetic pulse, maybe, trying to disrupt the stones remotely." The boundary flickered again, and for a moment it expanded. Just a few yards, but enough. "We need to reinforce the circle," I said. "Add more stones, strengthen the pattern." "That might make it worse," Sarah warned. "Or it might stabilize it long enough for us to convince someone to stop." We didn't have better options. We gathered stones from the surrounding area, placing them between the existing 7, creating a 14-point pattern. Double the symmetry, double the containment. The boundary stopped flickering. Stabilized, even seemed to contract slightly. "It's working," Maeve said. Then the radio crackled. Morrison's voice, cold and authoritative. "Rangers, return to base immediately. You are interfering with the federal operation." "Your operation is going to kill people," I responded. "The circles are containment, not weapons. We have specialists analyzing the situation. Your amateur interference is noted and will be addressed. Your specialists are wrong, and if you break those circles..." The transmission cut off. We worked through the night, reinforcing what circles we could reach. Site 5, Site 7, 2 others within range. 4 contained distortions, stabilized and strengthened, but there were 16 more sites we couldn't reach. At 5:57 a.m., my radio crackled with Morrison's voice one final time. "Last warning, Rangers. Clear the area. Operations commence in 3 minutes." I looked at Maeve and Sarah. We'd done what we could. 4 sites protected. It would have to be enough. "Everyone get clear of the distortion boundaries," I ordered. "Find solid ground and anchor yourselves." We rode our snowmobiles a quarter-mile away and waited. At 6:00 a.m. exactly, I felt it. A pulse. Not sound, not light, but something that vibrated through reality itself. Across the wilderness, 16 contained distortions were being disrupted simultaneously. The sky flickered, not dark to light, but stable to unstable. The geometry of space itself rippled like water. And from the horizons in 16 different directions, light began to bleed through. Not normal light. Geometric light. Angular, crystalline, wrong. The barriers were failing. "Oh God," Sarah whispered. The distortion at Site 5, reinforced, protected, held steady. But in the distance we could see others growing, spreading, merging. My radio erupted with panicked transmissions. Federal teams caught inside expanding distortion zones reporting impossible phenomena. Screaming about angles that shouldn't exist. Spaces that looped on themselves, reality coming apart at the seams. Then the transmissions cut off, one by one. Silence. "We need to leave," Maeve said. "Now, before those distortions spread here." She was right. We'd done what we could. Saved what we could. Now we had to survive. We rode south, away from the epicenter, monitoring the expanding distortions on our GPS. The zones were growing exponentially, feeding on each other, creating a web of broken space across the Brooks Range. Behind us, the northern wilderness was becoming something else, a place where human laws of physics no longer applied. We made it to Coldfoot Station just as the distortions reached the perimeter. We had minutes to evacuate. Commander Russo was organizing a withdrawal. Anyone who could move was loading into vehicles, heading south toward Fairbanks. "The federal team?" I asked. Russo's face was grim. Gone. All of them. The distortions expanded faster than anyone predicted. "Because there were 16 of them," I said. "They released 16 at once. They overlapped. reinforced each other. How many did you manage to stabilize? 4. Then those 4 sites are the only safe zones left in the entire Brooks Range. We evacuated south. By the time we reached Fairbanks, news was spreading. Satellite imagery showed something impossible. A region of northern Alaska where space itself appeared fractured, where the landscape seemed to exist in multiple states simultaneously. The official story was environmental disaster, permafrost collapse, methane release. Anything but the truth, but those of us who'd been there knew. We'd opened doors that were meant to stay closed, released distortions that were meant to stay contained. And now the Brooks Range was becoming something other than Earth. The 4 sites we'd protected, Sites 5 and 7 and 2 others, became islands of stability in a sea of impossible geometry. Dr. Venn and others like him walking their circuits, eternal guardians of the boundaries. I submitted my resignation a week later. So did Maeve. We'd done our jobs as rangers, protected the wilderness, tried to save lives. But we'd failed. The Brooks Range is closed now, permanently. The official exclusion zone extends 200 miles in every direction. No one goes in. But sometimes, on clear nights, if you know where to look, you can see it from Fairbanks. The flicker of geometric light on the northern horizon. The shimmer of broken space. And you can hear it if the wind is right. That sound, zeep, not a zipper, not fabric. Reality still tearing open. Some nights I dream about it. About the circles we reinforced, about Dr. Venn and the others walking their eternal circuits holding back the tide of impossible space. And I wonder how long they can hold. How long before the contained distortions fail too? How long before the geometry spreads south, toward cities, toward civilization, toward the world? I don't have answers, but I know this. There are places on Earth where reality is thin, where the barriers between dimensions are weak, and for thousands of years people who understood this marked those places, contained them, warned others away. We should have listened. Instead, we broke the seals, and now we're living with the consequences. The Brooks Range is lost, a sacrifice zone, a place where human laws don't apply anymore. And all we can do is watch the northern lights, not Aurora Borealis now, but something else, and hope that the few remaining circles hold. Because if they fail, the geometry won't stop at Alaska. The notebook pages were 30 feet up in a black spruce, fluttering like prayer flags in the Arctic wind. I spotted them during a routine grid search for Marcus Riley, a University of Alaska graduate student who'd been missing for 4 days. The pages caught my eye because they shouldn't have been there. Paper doesn't climb trees on its own, and the nearest branch was a good 20 feet off the ground. My name is Gage Norick, and I'd been a ranger in the Koyukuk Wilderness for 6 years. I'd seen plenty of strange things in that time. Bears acting territorial in February when they should be hibernating. Entire herds of caribou running in circles for hours. Ice formations that looked almost deliberate. But I'd never seen notebook pages stuffed into the crown of a tree. "Harper, you seeing this?" I radioed to my partner. Harper Layton's voice crackled back. "The tree? Yeah. That's not normal behavior for paper. I'm going up. Gage, we're losing daylight. We should mark it and come back tomorrow with proper climbing gear." She was right, of course. It was 3 p.m. in late November, which meant we had maybe 90 minutes before full darkness. The temperature was holding at 15 below, and the forecast called for a storm system moving in overnight. But Marcus Riley had been gone 4 days, and those pages might be his. I checked my climbing equipment, basic stuff, enough to get me up a spruce if I was careful. "I'll be quick, 5 minutes." Harper sighed over the radio but didn't argue further. She knew me well enough to recognize when my mind was made up. The climb was harder than it looked. Black spruce have branches all the way down, which makes them easy to climb in theory. In practice, the branches are brittle and covered in ice. I took my time, testing each handhold, trying not to think about the frozen ground 30 feet below. When I reached the cluster of pages, I could see they'd been deliberately stuffed into a fork in the trunk. Not blown there by wind, placed there, protected from the elements by the dense branches above. I pulled them out carefully. 5 pages, torn from a spiral notebook. The edges were damp, but the writing was still legible. The same sentence written over and over in increasingly frantic handwriting. The map changes when it gets dark. Over and over. Maybe 50 times across the 5 pages. Started neat and precise at the top of the first page. By the 5th page, the letters were barely controlled, slashing across the paper at odd angles. The map changes when it gets dark. The map changes when it gets dark. The map changes when it gets dark. My hand started shaking, and it wasn't from the cold. "Gage?" Harper's voice. "You okay up there?" "Yeah, coming down. And Harper, we have a problem." The descent took longer than the climb. My mind was racing, trying to make sense of what I'd found. By the time my boots hit solid ground, Harper was waiting with her flashlight already out. "What did you find?" I showed her the pages, watched her face go pale in the fading light. "This is Marcus Riley's handwriting," she said quietly. She'd met with his advisor before the search started, reviewed his research notes. This is definitely his. Why would he climb a tree to hide these? Maybe he wasn't hiding them. Maybe he was trying to mark something, leave a message where it wouldn't blow away. A message that says the map changes when it gets dark. We looked at each other. Around us, the forest was getting darker by the minute. The trees cast long shadows across the snow, and the temperature was dropping fast. "We need to set up camp," Harper said. "Resume search at first light." "Agreed. But let's move back to the ridge. I don't want to camp near this tree." "Why not? It's as good a spot as any." I couldn't explain it, just a feeling. Something about those obsessively written words, about the desperation in the handwriting, about the fact that Marcus had climbed 30 feet in sub-zero temperatures to stuff pages into a tree. "Humor me," I said. We hiked half a mile back to a small ridge we'd passed earlier. Good visibility, decent windbreak, flat ground for the tent. By the time we had camp set up, full darkness had fallen. We ate a cold meal. No fires in the backcountry during search operations. Too easy to obscure signs of the missing person. Then we went over the search grid for tomorrow, trying to predict where Marcus might have gone. His research was on magnetic anomalies, right? I asked. Harper nodded, pulling up her notes on her tablet. Specifically, localized variations in magnetic field strength. He was documenting areas where compasses give inconsistent readings. And he was working in this sector. This whole region, yeah, about 80 square miles. He had permits for solo research, experienced winter camper, knew what he was doing. Until he didn't. Harper frowned at the notebook pages, now sealed in an evidence bag. The map changes when it gets dark. What map? Topographic? GPS? Or maybe he means the landscape itself, the way things look different at night. That's just perception, lack of visual reference points. Shadows creating illusions. Sure. But if you're alone out here for weeks, if you're tired and cold and maybe getting disoriented, perception starts to matter more than reality. Harper was quiet for a moment. Then, "You think he had a psychological breakdown?" "I think something scared him badly enough to climb a tree and write the same sentence 50 times. We decided to take shifts sleeping, 2 hours each. Harper took first watch while I tried to rest. But sleep was elusive. I kept thinking about Marcus Riley alone in this wilderness, scribbling that warning over and over. The map changes when it gets dark. At some point, I must have dozed off because Harper was shaking my shoulder. "Gage, wake up. Something's wrong, sigh." I came awake instantly, reaching for my flashlight. "What is it?" "My compass. Look." She held it out. In the beam of my light, I could see the needle spinning slowly. Not random fluctuation. A steady, deliberate rotation. Clockwise, one full revolution every few seconds. "Magnetic anomaly," I said. Marcus was studying them. Makes sense we'd encounter one. "That's not the problem. Watch." She held the compass steady. The needle completed another rotation, then suddenly stopped. Pointed due north. Then she took 3 steps to her left. The needle swung violently to point in a completely different direction, almost southwest. Okay, that's weird. It gets weirder. She pulled out a second compass from her pack. This one's doing the same thing, but they're not agreeing on which direction is north. She held both compasses side by side. One pointed northwest, the other pointed northeast. Both supposedly showing magnetic north. "Equipment malfunction," I suggested, even though I didn't believe it. "Both of them at the same time? And my GPS is glitching too. Look." Her GPS unit was showing our position, but it kept flickering. 1 second we were on the ridge. The next second the display showed us half a mile east, then back to the ridge, then a quarter mile south. That's impossible. GPS uses satellites, not magnetic fields. "I know what GPS uses, Gage. I'm telling you, it's not working right." I pulled out my own GPS unit. Same problem. Position jumping around randomly like we were teleporting across the landscape. The map changes when it gets dark. "Harper, what time is it?" She checked her watch. "Just after 10 p.m. Why?" "When did you first notice the compass problem?" "Maybe 15 minutes ago. I was doing a routine check of our position, and..." She stopped. Understanding dawned on her face. "It got fully dark about 2 hours ago." We stood there in the cold, the implications sinking in. Around us, the wilderness was silent. No wind, no animal sounds, no distant rumble of ice. Just perfect, absolute silence. "This is what Marcus meant," Harper said quietly. He wasn't having a breakdown. He was documenting something real. At night, the magnetic field in this area goes haywire. Compasses become useless. GPS becomes unreliable. So, how do you navigate? You don't. You stay put until daylight. It made horrible sense. Marcus Riley, conducting research on magnetic anomalies, probably noticed the effect after dark. Started documenting it. Maybe tried to navigate despite the equipment failures, and got hopelessly lost in 80 square miles of identical-looking wilderness. "We need to report this," I said, reaching for my radio. Static, pure, white noise static. Harper tried hers. Same thing. "Radio uses electromagnetic waves," she said. "If the magnetic field is this disrupted, it might interfere with transmission. So, we're stuck here. No navigation, no communication, until dawn. Looks like it." I checked my watch. It was 10:17 p.m. Sunrise wouldn't come until around 9:30 a.m. Almost 12 hours of sitting in the dark with malfunctioning equipment. "We should be okay," Harper said, trying to sound confident. "We have shelter, supplies, warmth. We just wait it out." Right. What could go wrong? Famous last words. At 11 p.m. we heard the footsteps. Not close. Maybe 100 yards away, crunching through snow. Steady, rhythmic. Walking in a straight line past our position. "Animal?" Harper whispered. "Wrong pattern. Too steady. That's a human gait. We grabbed our flashlights and stepped outside the tent, scanned the darkness. The footsteps continued, moving from west to east, never getting closer or farther away. "Marcus!" I shouted. "Marcus Riley!" The footsteps didn't change, didn't stop, just kept that same steady rhythm, crunching through snow. Harper and I looked at each other. Without saying anything, we both started walking toward the sound. We made it maybe 50 yards before Harper grabbed my arm. "Stop. Look at your GPS." I checked the unit. Our position was shifting wildly. According to the GPS, we'd just walked 300 yards, but I'd counted our steps. We'd moved maybe 50. "The distance is wrong," I said. "Everything's wrong. Gage, we need to go back to the tent." But the footsteps could be anything. Echo effect, ice settling, audio hallucination from isolation. We can't trust our senses right now, and we definitely can't trust our equipment. She was right. But the footsteps were still there, still moving at that steady pace, and they sounded so human. We returned to the tent. The footsteps faded into the distance and eventually stopped. At midnight, we heard them again, this time coming from the south. Same steady rhythm, same human gait. At 1 a.m. from the north. At 2 a.m. from directly overhead. That last one made no sense. Footsteps in the sky. But we both heard them clearly. Crunch, crunch, crunch. Right above our tent, like someone walking on invisible ground 30 feet up. "Acoustic anomaly," Harper said, her voice shaking slightly. "Sound reflecting off ice crystals in the atmosphere, creating the illusion of directionality. You don't believe that? No. But it's better than the alternative, which is that Marcus Riley is still out here, walking, unable to find his way back, and the magnetic distortion is somehow distorting sound as well as navigation." I thought about that. Marcus Riley, lost and disoriented, walking in circles for 4 days and nights, hearing our shouts but unable to locate us because sound itself had become unreliable. If that's true, then at dawn, when the magnetic field normalizes, we find him. Or we find what's left of him. We didn't sleep after that. Just sat in the tent, listening to the footsteps that came every hour, always from a different direction, sometimes from impossible locations. At 3 a.m., Harper checked her compass. Both needles were spinning wildly, no longer even pretending to point north. At 4 a.m., I looked at my GPS. It showed us in 5 different locations simultaneously. At 5 a.m., the footsteps came from inside the tent. We both heard them. Crunch, crunch, crunch. Right between us, in the 2-foot gap where we'd laid out our gear. The sound of boots in snow, but there was no snow in the tent. No footprints. No visible presence. Just sound. Harper had her flashlight out, sweeping it across the tent floor. Nothing. The sound continued for maybe 30 seconds, then faded. "Okay," she said, her voice tight. "New theory. This isn't just magnetic distortion. This is something else." "Like what?" "I don't know. But Gage, what if Marcus wasn't just documenting magnetic anomalies? What if he found something worse?" I thought about the notebook pages, the desperate handwriting, the warning stuffed 30 feet up in a tree where it wouldn't be found by accident. The map changes when it gets dark. Not just magnetic north, the entire map. The way space itself works in this area. Direction, distance, sound, all of it unreliable, all of it wrong. "We're leaving at first light," I said. "Forget the search protocol. We get to the rally point, we call for backup, and we do not come back here without a full team." Agreed. We counted down the hours. At 6 a.m., the footsteps stopped. At 7 a.m., Harper's compass needles slowed their spinning. At 8 a.m., my GPS locked onto satellites and held position. At 9:15 a.m., the sun finally crept above the horizon. We packed in record time, both of us desperate to leave. As we were taking down the tent, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. Footprints in the snow around our campsite. Fresh ones from overnight. Human boot prints, size 11 or 12. They circled our tent 3 times, then headed east. Toward the tree where I'd found the notebook pages. "Marcus?" Harper said. "Has to be. No one else out here." We followed the prints. They led us through the forest, weaving between trees, occasionally doubling back on themselves. The stride length was irregular, sometimes long and purposeful, sometimes short and shuffling, like someone who was exhausted, disoriented, barely able to walk. After a mile, we found his campsite, or what was left of it. The tent was shredded, torn apart from the inside. Gear scattered everywhere, some of it in trees, some buried in snow. A sleeping bag ripped open, feathers everywhere. And more notebook pages. Dozens of them stuffed into every crack and crevice in the surrounding trees, all with the same message. The map changes when it gets dark. Some pages had additional notes in the margins, coordinates that didn't match any location on our topographic maps, compass bearings that pointed in impossible directions, sketches of the landscape that showed features that didn't exist, hills where there should be valleys, trees where there should be open tundra, and on the final page, a new message. Don't trust the map. Don't trust the compass. Don't trust your eyes. When it gets dark, trust nothing but the dawn. Harper was photographing everything, documenting the scene. He knew. He figured out what was happening and tried to warn anyone who came after him. The question is, where is he now? The footprints led away from the destroyed camp, heading north. We followed them for another quarter mile. Then they stopped, not faded away, not obscured by wind or new snow, just stopped. Mid-stride, one boot print, then nothing. Like Marcus Riley had taken one step and ceased to exist. Harper and I stood at the end of the trail, looking at the impossible nothing ahead of us. "This is what happened before," I said quietly. At night, he was walking. The magnetic distortion hit, and he couldn't navigate. Probably ended up miles from where he thought he was. Set up camp, went to sleep. Next night, same thing, kept getting more and more lost. But the footprints, Gage, they just stop. Maybe he climbed a tree. Maybe the prints continue on rock or ice where we can't see them. You don't believe that? No, I didn't, because I'd seen the desperate handwriting. The warnings stuffed in trees. The destroyed campsite. This was someone who'd been terrified, who'd experienced something that broke their understanding of reality. And now he was gone, just gone. My radio crackled. Static at first, then a voice breaking through. "Ick, Layton, do you copy? This is Coldfoot Base, respond." Harper grabbed her radio. "Coldfoot, this is Layton, we copy. Sunrise re-established communication." "Copy that, what's your status?" "We've located evidence of Marcus Riley. His campsite is destroyed and we have reason to believe he's in severe distress. Requesting immediate SAR deployment and electromagnetic equipment to monitor magnetic field variations." A pause, then, "Electromagnetic equipment? Can you clarify?" Harper explained what we'd experienced. The compass failures, the GPS glitches, the acoustic anomalies. The dispatcher sounded skeptical but agreed to send a full search team with specialists. "ETA 6 hours. Can you hold position?" We looked at each other. 6 more hours in this area. With the sun up, it should be safe. The magnetic distortions only manifested after dark. Should be. "We'll hold," I said. "But we're not staying after sunset. If we don't find Riley by 3 p.m., we're extracting to the rally point." "Understood," Stay safe, Rangers. We spent the next 5 hours searching, expanding circles from where the footprints ended, looking for any sign of Marcus Riley. We found more notebook pages in trees. Found his backpack, empty except for more compasses. He'd been carrying 7 of them, all showing different readings in the photos Harper had taken of his gear. But we didn't find Marcus. At 2:45 p.m., with the sun already touching the horizon, we made the call to extract. SAR could continue the search with fresh teams and proper equipment. We'd done all we could. We were packing our gear when I saw it. High up in a spruce tree, maybe 40 feet up. Something red, fabric maybe, caught in the branches. Harper, that tree, you see it? She looked where I was pointing. Could be his jacket. He was wearing red according to the missing person report. I'm going up. Gage, we need to leave. 5 minutes. If it's his jacket, there might be ID, maybe his phone. I was climbing before she could argue. The light was fading fast, turning everything gray and shadowy. But I could still see the red fabric up near the crown of the tree. 30 feet up, 35, 40. I reached the fabric. It wasn't a jacket, it was more notebook pages, wrapped in a red stuff sack to protect them from the elements. I pulled them down carefully. These pages were different, covered in complex diagrams, mathematical equations, mapping coordinates alongside magnetic field measurements, and a final message, written in Marcus Riley's increasingly frantic hand. I understand now. The magnetic distortion isn't random, it's a pattern. The land is shifting, not on the maps but in reality. At night, the valleys move. The hills rearrange, the forest walks. I've been traveling in circles, but the circles are in different locations each night. Yesterday's camp was 5 miles south. Now it's here. Tomorrow it might be 5 miles north. The landscape is alive, it moves, and I don't think I can escape it. If you're reading this, get out before dark. The map changes, the land changes. Nothing stays where it should be, nothing. The entry stopped mid-word, like he'd been interrupted. Gage! Harper's shout from below. Gage, the compass! I looked down. She was holding both compasses, and even from 40 feet up I could see the needles starting to spin. I checked my watch. 3:07 p.m. The sun was touching the horizon. Darkness was coming. And according to Marcus Riley's final notes, when darkness came, the land itself would move. I climbed down fast. By the time I hit ground, the sun had dipped below the mountains. We need to move. Harper was shouldering her pack. Which direction? Her GPS flickered wildly, both compasses spinning. I cut marks into trees every 50 feet to mark a straight line east. After 10 marks, Harper stopped. Gage, that tree ahead has your mark. We'd made a perfect circle without realizing it. We climb, use the stars. From above the canopy, the stars were wrong. Shifted. The North Star several degrees off. Below, footsteps. Steady. Mechanical. When I shouted for Marcus, they didn't change rhythm. Harper's GPS showed we'd walked 300 yards. We'd moved maybe 50. We returned to our tent. The footsteps came hourly from different directions. At 2 a.m. from overhead, impossible. At 5 a.m. from inside the tent, crunch, 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 right between us. No presence, just sound. Dawn came. We found boot prints circling our camp. They led to Marcus's destroyed campsite. Tent shredded, gear everywhere, notebook pages in every tree. All saying, the map changes when it gets dark, plus new notes, impossible coordinates, landscape sketches showing features that didn't exist. Final page, don't trust the map, don't trust the compass, don't trust your eyes. When it gets dark, trust nothing but the dawn. The footprints led north, then stopped mid-stride. One print, then nothing. Base radioed. Sent a team. We searched until 2:45 p.m. Found Marcus's backpack with 7 compasses inside. No Marcus. Then I saw something red 40 feet up a spruce. I climbed. More pages. Complex diagrams, mathematical equations, and a message. The magnetic distortion isn't random, it's a pattern. At night, the land shifts, not on maps, but in reality. Valleys move, hills rearrange. The forest walks. I've been traveling in circles, but the circles are in different locations each night. The landscape is alive. It moves. Get out before dark. Gauge, Harper shouted. The compass. Needles spinning. 3:07 p.m. Sun touching the horizon. We found Marcus at 7:30 a.m. next morning. Dead 3 days. Peaceful. His final notebook read, I could escape, but I need to document. Others will come. They need the warning. So I'll stay. Let the shift take me. Maybe my shadow will walk these woods forever, warning others. The map changes when it gets dark, and sometimes the map takes you with it.